Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. And we are coming back at you once again. It's another week. It's another Seahawks topic we got to digest. We got to go through. We got to get all the ins and outs of. So we're going to do it the best way we know how to do it together. It's me, Seahawks Brendan Nelson, and it is Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Feeling good about this upcoming season. We finally kind of know how it's all sort of going to shape up. There's no more, well, are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? We kind of know what we're going to be, and it's. I feel pretty good about where we're at as far as the team goes. And we got summer on the horizon. We always know that's better for us in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh yeah, it's starting to get there already for me over here. We've had a couple of days pushing 90. We've had a couple of days pushing past that. So it's getting here. It's definitely getting here. We're also getting towards the slower part of the NFL offseason where there's the least amount of stuff happening. In fact, over the last week, about the only thing that is noteworthy from really NFL news in general, but Seahawks related news would be the 3-day rookie minicamp where you get all your rookies in, all your draft picks get in, and they basically start getting ramped up on NFL speed, NFL nomenclature, NFL play calling, try to integrate themselves into whatever playbook your team is using at that point in time. You get your UDFAs in there, and they need to start making a good first impression because they have long odds to make the team. And of course, you've got some mini camp invites who basically only have those 3 days to make a really good impression if they want any chance of making your team.
Yeah.
So there isn't necessarily a ton we can take away from rookie minicamp. I mean, Pete talks positively about pretty much everybody there because that's what you do.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would like to briefly talk about from this rookie minicamp that I thought kind of stood out was we've got some I guess we're doing some sumo wrestling training with these guys because they put on a little bit of weight. Three rookies in particular, three of our draft picks came in weighing significantly more than they did at the combine. Now, first was Mike Morris, and we knew about Mike.
Mhm.
Mike said he was 295, and he is about 295. He was 275 at the combine, but we want him at 295, so that's no problem. Cameron Young measured 304 at the combine. He is now about 320. And he's a nose tackle, so I don't think being bigger is going to hurt you. I got no issue with that.
No.
And then you've got Olu Oluwatimi, who measured about 309 at the combine and is now supposedly around 320. So do you have any particular thoughts about that? Or do you think it's just, oh, they're going to start getting out there on the field at the VMAC at training camp and they're going to lose that weight right back?
I don't necessarily think that it's bad weight, first and foremost. My instincts on this is that when people go to the combine, and it doesn't matter what position we're really talking about, the agents and the trainers have told the players to lean in towards the side of being at your lightest as you possibly can as you approach the combine in order so that you can test the best in the athletic testing scores. Going out there and repping the bench a couple of extra reps is not going to be as impressive as getting a little bit lower on your 40 time, getting the 3-cone better, getting the short shuttle better. Look at all the receivers, Brendan, that went into this last draft that were 5'9" guys that really probably should come to the NFL showing them, hey, no, we can get up to 190. We can handle the punt, but instead 180. Emmanuel Forbes at 166, a cornerback in this draft. You can go down the line. There's a lot of these players that tried to lighten up. And this is evident with Mike Morse, for instance, who said 295 was what I was playing at last year. It's what I was playing with on Michigan. I dropped down to try to be this edge and show NFL teams. And it's honestly, it's that whole explanation that he gives with that is really our benefit at that point. Him trying to become that. If he just gone into it, said, I'm going to be a 3-tech or a 4-eye in this defense, whatever. If he just gone into that combine experience saying that, where I'm going to show up the combine 295 and then I'll test where I'm testing out at that point. But to me, all the way down the line, you could explain this with each and every one of these guys why they got light. And it's because they want to make sure that they're testing at their fastest, their quickest, especially a guy like Oluwatimi that was going to need to go to a scheme specific place that was going to be able to take advantage of his mobility. If he didn't test well with his mobility, he might almost be undrafted a little bit if he goes in heavy and can't really move. And that's the part that they're trying to probably most avoid in those kind of situations with that. So it's kind of a trend I've noticed with it. I think with Young, it's a little different where they want him to be that stout 0-tech, and he's not as stout on his tape at Mississippi, and that's in that respect of things. And one of the ways to get stout is to get stronger and get bigger.
Yeah. I agree that the weight gain on Morris and Young was definitely good news, if anything. Oluwatimi, it made me think for a second because he's already not a great athlete. And
Mhm,
the appealing part of him is his abilities in space. So I was like, I don't need you to put on any weight, I don't think.
mhm.
So that did make me think, I wonder if that's good or not. Granted, it probably won't matter because by the time the season starts, he'll probably have lost a good amount of that weight back. I remember reading something once about how Patrick Ewing would lose like 10 pounds every game he played because of sweat. And once that training camp hits and these guys are doing 2-a-days out on the VMAC, probably going to lose all that weight back.
It could be. Carroll has tended to lean towards one of the bigger linemen in the past, so he's not a guy that's going to shy away. And we haven't really, outside of Austin Blythe, transitioned to that faster form of offensive lineman, maybe outside of the tackle position. But it's also that I think they feel comfortable with him having played at that weight last year with Michigan. And though the testing scores may tell you with Oluwatimi you should have some concerns with him moving in space, the tape doesn't tell you that he's has troubles moving in space. I mean, that's my whole thing with that whole thing with the testing scores is it's all well and good if they don't test well. But that if we come back to the tape and you can't really find representations or examples to me of them failing on their tape due to a lack of athleticism or a lack of quickness, then what value should we then put on those testing numbers? And to me, I let the tape override at that point. And maybe I should build more to having those testing numbers carry more of the day. But I just, when the tape is as good as it was with Oluwatimi, and this isn't just my eyes either. Of course, he won 2 different awards, lineman awards this offseason. So he's really a technically refined player that helps him be quicker. You know, it's the old age argument. We can look at things in the speed standpoint of things, but it's also that the football is so much times about instinct, knowing how to get from point A to point B efficiently. It's having linebackers last year that are super fleet of foot, but neither Jordan Brooks nor Cody Barton were going to get from point A to point B as fast as Bobby Wagner, despite him at this point in his career being slower than them. We can get held up in that stuff at times about all this speed, but it's sometimes what the tape shows you. To me, that's got to carry the day here with it. And I bet you if you were to ask him, like with Mike Morris, Brendan, he probably played up around that 320-pound weight spot last year for Michigan when he looked so comfortable moving in space, as his tape definitely informs us.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think that's probably the case. So nothing I was really concerned about, but you got to have something to talk about right now, and there isn't a heck of a lot.
Do you, on one other topic with the OTAs, I didn't really think it was a very big deal, but there's some people locally making a little bit of a thing about Jamal Adams not showing up to OTAs. Where do you stand with that?
I don't really care about it that much.
I don't either. To me, they're making a deal, and I thought he's injured. He's coming off a major injury. He's rehabbing like hell right now. I mean,
Mhm.
what are we doing here? You know,
I
like
mean,
what?
he's not sitting at home eating KFC. We know that. We see the
Yeah,
Instagram stories.
they were talking about like he's in Florida on a beach digging his toes in the sand. It's like the guy knows his career's on the line right now. I don't think that he needs anybody to inform him of the sense of urgency. And they go back to they were saying the rain like, well, these great teams all have all the guys show up with the thing, and maybe the modern NFL is changing a little bit in that respect of things at times, and it's good to have, but I don't think it makes it a necessity for success.
Yeah, I believe Brooks isn't there yet either, for whatever that's worth. I don't know. I just don't think anything of it really.
Yeah, I'm with it as well. So yeah, that was one I was like, okay.
Mhm. All right, so that's really all there is to say. Jonah Tavai was listed as a nose tackle, I guess, which is kind of amusing because he's like 290, but that doesn't really mean anything, and he's long odds to make the team anyway. So whatever. There a lot of the stuff in rookie minicamp is like you don't really get to learn that much as an external observer. I think it's more about what the players can learn.
I agree with you. I think the biggest thing you want or that you're hoping for when you go into this point is that you got all the guys available. You don't want the Dwayne Eskridge type that shows up and they're already fat, fighting through a hamstring or a foot thing. You want guys that can get in there and start to get acclimated as quickly as possible because that's going to set them up for the best chance to be able to hit the ground running when the season starts, as opposed to being behind the 8 ball with the playbook and not caught up to everybody else. Which is something I think happened with Eskridge, and then especially in that first. Well, it still probably continues to happen. One other thing that popped into my mind I wanted to talk to you about because it did come up yesterday on my show on my channel was whether or not Seattle's done or not or has any cap space or not. I mean, you and I can go back and forth on this part of it with you in that respective things. But Quinnen Williams with the New York Jets is wanting a new contract, and he's going to want to surpass Deron Payne out there in Washington, who just signed his new deal, which I think set the new ground. territory. Well, no, Donald's probably really set the territory, but nobody's going to reach, I don't think, Donald's deal. Where are you at on the Quinton Williams, man? What do you, is this interest you in any way? Only for the right price, or damn the torpedoes? Let's go.
I mean, I'd love to do it, but I'm not thinking for 1 second that this team is going to do it. So to me, it's kind of like, yeah, of course. I think he's a phenomenal player, a very special player, and would definitely address a significant need on this team. And all those other positive things you can say about Quinton Williams, but you'd have to trade for him. You'd have to give him a new contract. Those are things that I just don't think are going to happen right now. So it's fun to talk about, but it also seems to me kind of like, let's talk about things that can actually happen, that have some degree of chance of happening.
Well, I mean, I will say this, Brendan, the team in the past has made moves when they felt like they're in a potential desperate situation in a positional group. And while I would not say the defensive line position is in a desperate state right now, they could easily end up finding themselves arriving at training camp and that being the case. And while they are up against it in the cap situation here, we certainly know that they have the impetus to make a deal to move a player for picks. And yeah, the Jamal deal didn't work out. And yeah, they've had a couple other deals that might have been the best, but they've been willing to do those kind of deals. And so, for me, the question comes down to, I'm with you in that I don't think it's a likely thing to happen, but it's also one of, do they get down into training camp and go a little bit like we had with the Clowney year, or a little bit like we had with the Jamal Adams year, or a little bit like we had with the Sheldon Richardson year, where they go, oh, dear God, we didn't put enough on the plate here. We left out the steak.
Yeah. Here's my thing, though. The Jets are all in to win the Super Bowl this year. This is their, this is not a 2-year window. This is a 1-year window. So they can pretend like they're not going to pay him all they want to. I don't buy it. That's your best defensive player. You're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers and then say, we're going to weaken our defense dramatically because now we're going to be cheap. I don't buy it.
What if they're thinking they're getting some players back from you in return from Seattle to help you out cumulatively at that point?
What would the players be? Are we talking about giving up Tariq Woolen at that point?
No, it wouldn't be. It would be more like, you package in a Darrell Taylor and then start to go along that path of things to finding, and you're obviously still putting picks into play on this, but what you're doing is you're giving them picks and the player, and then if they want to, they can take those picks and move them for another player to offset that if they want to try to create, close that hole. Because the question comes down, do they want to pay him the amount, they got to pay? Do they have the money to pay him the amount he wants to be paid right now? That's another part of it too, with where they're at in their cap situation. So I'm with you in that it isn't likely. It would be interesting though if it is one that is on the table, Brendan, and the cost comes down to, you got to give up a Darrell Taylor, a first and a second.
I mean, I would do it, but I don't think this team would. Yeah. And then on top of that, you have to pay him. Are you even able to create that cap room to pay him? You could, but you'd have to really overextend yourself. You'd have to restructure Diggs, probably restructure Jamal Adams, and marry yourself to them for another year at least. You'd probably have to extend Nwosu. You'd have to, man, it's a lot of very uncomfortable things you'd have to do, I think, to make it even feasible.
Agreed. It would be a definite move that would be all about going forward if you were trying to really do it. But if you brought him into this defensive line now and added him on, it would definitely change the way we look at the front seven, and I think in a fairly major way, even though he's just one player. But it's just an interesting thing to discuss. I think something right now, it's not a likely thing to happen, but these things twist and turn, Brendan, and these negotiations go through the ringer a little bit at times. And I think that they're still having to kind of figure out the contractual stuff there with Aaron Quite to kind of figure out if he's going to give them any kind of discount, or if he's going to do the Rodgers thing, which is rake him from every dollar, baby.
I mean, I'm sure he will do that, but who else are they giving big money to? Because Garrett Wilson's on the rookie deal, AVT's on the rookie deal. Carl Lawson, do they have Carl Lawson still?
They do have Carl Lawson.
Okay, he's probably making big bucks.
Yeah, he's making big money. You're probably right. They're not necessarily. They're certainly not paying on the. I mean, they're still paying Kyle. Remember, they're paying first round money to Kyle Wilson. That's $10 million plus right there to a backup quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Zach Wilson. Okay,
Zach Wilson and Ahmad Gardner. That's, even though he's on a rookie deal there, he's a top 4 pick. So that's $10 million, almost $10 million a year. He's going to be at too. He's not necessarily cheap. I think they signed Uzuma a couple years ago in free agency. They had a couple 2 free agency back. They spent some money. But you're right. They might be able to just pull it in there. We'll see what happens. I think they're probably likely to sign him. But if it does turn, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. Also, by the way, if they don't make the playoffs this year and maybe even make a little bit of a run, the coach and GM are probably getting fired. So that being the case,
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
agree.
they're going to be trading for future picks they're not even going to get to use.
Yeah, well, that's why I think they would trade the picks and then move the picks onward in a different trade. You know, find a,
You have to
you
find
know,
that trade though, but yeah.
well, like let's say if you let me give you let me give you an example. The Jets go to you and they say, okay, flip us that first and that second, and give us Taylor back, or give us a pick player and Ucho Nuos, whatever. You throw them that back, right? They take that first round pick, then they go over to the Raiders and they say, Raiders, you're not going anywhere this year with Devontae Adams, so why don't we throw you one of these first round picks for Devontae Adams this year?
Mhm. I mean, Devontae, I guess there's some way he can rework his contract to where he could get traded. We're assuming that, right?
I would think that Devontae at this point would be mightily happy to find his way out of Las Vegas. It's not exactly the same situation he found himself in going to that. He's
Okay.
got He's facing down the barrel of Jimmy Garoppolo throwing him passes this upcoming season. I think he's that thumb is out there on the highway right now, man. And he's like, any car, I'll sit in the back of the truck. You got chickens? No problem. I can deal with the chickens. We're good.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely fun to think about, but it's a lot to ask. It's a tall
Yeah.
task.
Agreed.
Mhm.
It would take a Prometheus-like effort of pushing a rock up a hill to get this off. But I think it is an interesting one that presents itself potentially. Not now, not right at the moment, but it's just let's monitor the situation and see where it tracks to as we go through the summer.
Okay. So that's basically the rookie mini camp plus off-season chatter stuff out of the way. There's just not a heck of a lot going on right now, not yet. There will be. It will warm up when every team's in full-time training camp. Players are going to get hurt, and then that's going to motivate a trade in all likelihood. Maybe an edge rusher is going to go down somewhere in the AFC, and then we can trade Darrell Taylor for a third-round pick or something like that. That could happen. We could have a guy get hurt, and then we have to go make a trade. Like that kind of stuff happens every year. But right now, we're just kind of sitting back and waiting. So I think now is as good a time as any to start really opening up on these rookies, these top Seahawks rookies. We're going to do our top 4 guys today. So Witherspoon, JSN, Derick Hall, and Zach Charbonnet. That's the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Get into
And now that we know these guys are Seahawks, now that we know these guys are on our team, you can spend a lot more time on them because when you're trying to look at like 250 different players, you don't want to spend too much time on any one guy. You're trying to move through. And to a certain extent, you don't want to spend a few hours looking into a prospect and then think about it and be like, this guy's a 2% chance of being on my team. Like, what am I doing all this for? But once they're on your team, you're like, okay, now I can just throw myself into this. So that's what I've been doing for the past couple of weeks. And I just want to go ahead and start unpacking exactly what we're getting into with these guys. Some of the stuff we say in this video, we will have said before, sometimes many times when we were initially covering the draft, when we were discussing the draft right after it happened, but that's okay. Like, it's worth repeating this stuff because these are such an important part of our team going forward. So does that all sound good to you?
Sounds great, man. Yeah, I think it's gonna be useful. There'll be plenty of little tidbits here of new stuff I think we'll have included too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and start with our top pick, Devon Witherspoon. And apparently, my viewers have told me that it is pronounced Devon, even though it's clearly not spelled that way.
Yes.
Not even close, but
I
apparently
got
it's Devon.
chastised for it too.
Yeah.
They'll get you corrected quick on those pronunciations.
Mhm. All right. So Devon Witherspoon, cornerback out of the Illinois college program, the Fighting Illini, number 1 defense in the league last year. So I'm going to go through basically the cold hard facts of him as a player. His measurements, his scores in certain testing criteria,
Mhm.
and then I'll pass it over to you, and we'll talk about what the player brings to the table.
Sounds good.
So he's 22 years old, and will be 22 years old when the season starts. He is 5'11 and a half, so just shy of 6 feet, which is actually right in the middle as far as cornerbacks go historically at the combine. He's in the 54th percentile, so right in the middle. Right at the bottom in terms of weight for a cornerback, there 181 puts him 10th percentile. which makes me wonder about Emmanuel Forbes. He must have been like 2 percentile or something.
He was paper thin.
Yeah. Arm length is just a little below average, 31 1/4 inches. Hands, just shy of 9 inches, was 25th percentile. So in terms of his measurements, he's actually a little bit small. He did not test because he had a hamstring injury. He didn't even do anything at his pro day. The only thing he did was a private workout where he ran a 4.4240, which is pretty good. It is generally believed that he was still recovering and is capable of running a 4.38 or something like that. But that's what we're looking at in terms of his objective measurements. So let's start diving deep into what the player is.
Well, you got a guy that was certainly a late bloomer a little bit. This has been something we saw from Boye Mafe as maybe something even the Seahawks look to kind of target along in prospects now, which is those guys that might be somewhat new to football, played other sports, where they're saying, hey, there's some top end here because this kid's just still learning how to play this position, play this game. So he only played 2 years in high school, I believe. But he has steadily improved there with Illinois over his couple of years of playing there. He was a 0-star recruit, though, because of this, so was not a highly touted guy coming out. But that's not because he wasn't, from an athletic profile standpoint, worthy, just that he had just been so new to it, probably didn't look great on tape. This is a guy that, there's you hear about legends and former players, and when they start talking about prospects, they'll start to you can start to catch a little gleam in their eye at times when they'll speak about certain guys that really capture their imagination. And for me, in a lot of ways, Witherspoon has been that guy for a lot of different, be it a guy like Steve Smith or go back and listen to the way Rondé Barber talks about him in his film breakdown of him. And you can just tell that these guys love this guy and love how he plays the game. And not only that, feel like he's going to be a really good player at the next level too. And it's not that they come out just effusively saying that, Brendan. It's just that you can feel that in their whole general vibe and the way that they talk about him. He is excellent in man coverage. He can also play some zone. He needs to clean some stuff up in zone, but he's a very, very sticky cornerback. He had, I think, like a 20-something rating or something like that last year. I had the number here somewhere.
25.3.
25.3 passer rating last year, 0 touchdowns allowed. He was the second highest rated corner by PFF. What metric do you want? He dominated within it for the most part. Had his share of interceptions as well. He's got ball skills for day, and it's pure ball skills. It's not just, well, he can track it, but he can't catch it, or he can catch it, but he can't track it, or he can get the ball into his hands, but he can't reel it down and get his feet down. He's got an ability to high point a ball, reach out, catch it, just like you would have from a receiver in many ways. And that stands out on his tape over and over. He only had 3 interceptions, but he easily could have had so many more that were very, very close. And he's worthy of being this high of a pick. He is, maybe a little bit shortcomings as far as the physical stuff goes. But when you watch him on the tape, he is so sudden and fast, and he plays absolutely recklessly in a wonderful fashion. Coach Carroll has talked about him being like Troy Polamalu. I've had a buddy that mentioned the name Sean Taylor, which caught me off guard. I said, Sean Taylor's a safety. He said, I know, but he just has that same kind of, it's like I'm telling, there's like, you hear these people talk about that that might trust football. And the way they speak about him is just in this way that is, they can't quite always quantify it, but when you're seeing them talk about it in that way, that there's something with this kid in the way that they are speaking about him, that there is maybe something a little bit extra special here with him. But he is the best outside tackling corner in this draft, no doubt about it. That's going to translate over to the NFL level. Some people worry, Brendan, because of his size, that's not going to hold up and he's not going to be able to sustain that tackling ability. But I always point back to, as you and I have talked about many times, the best tackling cornerback in NFL history is Antoine Winfield, who was 5'8". So size doesn't matter. Dog of the fight, all that stuff. Not size of the dog, but the dog of the size and the fight of the dog with the fight. Whatever that saying goes through, I can never get it right. But that's him. He is that kind of guy that's going to sit there all day and be chewing it. And he's going to let you know. For those folks that want us to go back to the days of having swagger and our secondary being out there and telling you what they're going to do and how it's going to be done, then going out and doing it, kind of the Babe Ruth on the football field where you're pointing your shot. Well, you've got a guy here who's going to be that guy all over on the tape. In the first film that I watched of him, Brendan, I'm sure you've been watching it too. He's right there just barking in the ear of the receiver all game long. It's not stopping. But a wonderful player. They got themselves a cat here that I just hope They use him in man. That's the real key on this one, Brendan, with him when we go deep dives. They got to use him in man. That's what Tariq did best. That's what he did best. This opens the door to stack fronts. This opens the door to blitzing. This opens the door to hyper aggression from the Seahawks defense, which we haven't seen here in probably 25 years.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with all of that. So, to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the way he's been playing lately, because of course, 2022 was by far the best year of his career. It's not even close. The year before he was good, but nothing over the top. And the year before he actually got beat up a little bit. He only played in 7 games and he gave up like 4 touchdowns in those 7 games, which is nothing like the player we've seen the last 2 years.
Yeah.
One thing that stands out is, and I think a lot of cornerbacks do this, but over the last 2 seasons, so 22 games he's played in, he's played about 1,200 snaps as an outside corner. So it's like 1,228. And then he's played just under 200 reps from the slot. So given the fact that he's a little bit on the smaller side, and he doesn't have long arms, a lot of people are already wondering, is he going to end up playing in the slot in the NFL? And I don't think he will. He's not that small. He needs to put on a little bit of weight maybe, but his height is actually right around average. He's just shy of 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this might be a scenario where, especially this rookie year, he plays outside in base and then slides into the slot on slot required plays?
I think the Seahawks would be smart to do so, especially if they're hesitant to run a lot of man on the outside, which they have been predominantly in the past, very hesitant to do so, right? They don't want to play press since the rules changed over, where we started getting slapped on our hands by the NFL with the rule changes when Sherman and Browner were pressing guys to death off the line of scrimmage. So now we've gone into off coverage with the corners, and then it's dropping into zone. And so if you want to go into playing man, you're usually going to do it off a bump and run, which means you got to get your guys back up there a little bit. So if the team is hesitant, Brendan, to, utilize their corners in that fashion, you do, even in the moments where you're running those cover 3 looks with the corners dropping deep with the free safety, if you have a slot corner on the field, he's still going to be just running man. He's not always, most of the time, for the most part, he's not going to be running zone. So now you could, to your point on that, bump Witherspoon inside and then have Witherspoon be the guy that carries in there. I think it would be very smart to do that, even if you're willing to run with him man on the outside. If you just do it on those certain matchups, Brendan, where it makes so much sense. Oh, we got Cooper Kupp this week. Devon, we're going to bounce you inside. We feel good enough about the guys on the outside, because let's remember that we play the Vikings or in a Jefferson or a Cooper Kupp and the Rams. They don't have guys that are now the number 3 receivers, essentially, right? Because you'd count the slot guys, the de facto 1. You'd be counting it weird, but you end up at a place there where you're like, okay, Kobe Bryant or Trey Brown or Mike Jackson now on the outside are going to only have to deal with the number 2 wide receiver, because their slot guy that they want to lean on, we've got now with Devon. Or Amon St. Brown, week 2 with the Detroit Lions. Kick him inside right there in that week. Have your plethora of outside guys out there working on the other end of it. So I would love to see it, Brendan, because there's some matchups there where I think you could make it really hard on offenses like the Rams, that when Kupp's out there, all they're doing is just feeding him like just all day. They'll just sit there, and especially when Stafford's out there, he's not like, well, I got to mix this around. Stafford will sit there and cover it or not. He'll just pepper the ball to one guy all day long. Oh, you're muted.
My bad. Because there is a little bit of concern about how short his arms are and how that affects his ability to play outside. Now, I know we don't really do a lot of press man stuff anymore because, like you said, the NFL kind of cracked down on it. But one thing I noticed, because I watched almost every snap from 3 Illinois games last year, because I wanted to see, you can watch a highlight reel, but you also want to watch the tape to really see what's going on here. And one thing that I noticed was that it was pretty rare that he was actually pressing. In fact, I watched every snap from the Wyoming game, which was their first game of the year, and he was always at least 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. And they still didn't complete a pass on him. You would think that at some point he'd give up an easy 5-yard reception, like Trey Flowers style, but no. And watching it, it seems like he just has so much confidence in his ability to read the route and run the route before the receiver does and be there, that he's like, I can play 7 yards off and I'm not going to give up the easy catches. So I looked on PFF and he played about 100 snaps in press last year of about 400 where he was in coverage. So little less than 25% of the time he was actually jamming at the line. So that's not a big part of his game. So I do wonder if the slot would be good for him.
Could be. And I don't have a lot of confidence we're going back to press looks either necessarily. So I think that Carroll just kind of did away with that when he's like, okay, you're going to change the rules to hurt this thing, then I'll just stop doing it. And he's very likely, with the fact like you said, he played a majority of snaps anyway in off coverage. They'll probably just have him do that. But I don't think, for instance, if we look at the arm length last year, what pushed Kobe Bryant into the slot and what might keep him in the slot or a safety or wherever they end up landing him at, I think he had 30.5-inch arms. So this kid's got 31, I think, and a half, or
31 and a quarter.
31 and a quarter. So there's a little more length there, maybe just enough in that respect of things. And he's much more hyper athletic. Those routes you're talking about that he's got so much confidence in, the reason those quarterbacks don't test him is because when they do, he's so close to making an interception because he's so sudden and his change of direction is so nice that he's going to get on top of that ball, even on those short routes, in a way other cornerbacks can't.
Yeah, like in that Wyoming game, his interception came on a rep where he was lined up in the slot. That's one thing. He played nearly a third of that game from the slot, actually, and he didn't play nearly that much slot in other games, but that was one thing watching that game that stood out for me. By the way, he allowed 0 catches in that game, so even playing off, they couldn't get anything going.
It's the new way offenses are attacking, be it the Rams or the Vikings. We can go through a list of a lot of teams out there that use these slot guys now as their somewhat of their de facto number one. And if you've got a way to try to get around necessarily doing what you've done in recent years, which is just trying to get by at the slot corner position, Ugo Amadi's, and I would even argue Kobe Bryant a bit last year, who's not maybe well suited to be in the slot. Well, having a guy in there now that can be a little bit more of now a plus defender for you in that spot sure could help out the defense, I think, leaps and bounds, especially because I think historically speaking in recent years, Brendan, attacking us with your slot has been one of the ways to go after our defense with how much we've been showing the cover 2 looks and whatnot, which to me, if you show me cover 2 pre-snap as a quarterback, you're kind of starting to already open the door to me to attacking the slot underneath, because I know those safeties are probably not coming up unless you're really running the Fangio, like every other snap, you're rotating them and, Brendan doing the different stuff to try to really fool the QB.
Oh, and by the way, real quick, his coverage numbers from last season, because that's obviously the season, and you were talking about that QB rating he allowed. The exact numbers were 62 targets in 12 games, 22 receptions allowed, so like 37% completion, 206 yards, and that's how you get to your 25.3 QB rating.
Yeah. Those are insanely legitimate numbers at the college level. It's very hard to put up those kind of numbers, especially with the amount he got those snaps in the slot, because it is so hard to cover guys in the slot with the two-way routes and no sideline to lean on for protection. You're out there on an island truly at that point.
Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. You worried about Spoon's aggressiveness be exploited? McVay and Shanny could see this as an opportunity to pump fake like they have with Adams at times. So this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the game that the Illinois played against Indiana last year. This was the one game last year where Witherspoon got beaten up. He gave up almost half of his yards in this one game for the whole season. And I wanted to watch that game, and I watched every snap, or almost every snap, because I couldn't find the actual every snap tape. I found like basically a full game highlight reel that had a few plays cut out. But I wanted to see what happened in that game, and it was basically 2 big plays down the field. He gave up like a 40-yarder and another 40-yarder. It was just kind of a streak route. He got a little behind the play. But I think that's indicative of one of the issues that people think that Witherspoon may have, where he can get fooled a little bit by crafty quarterbacks. He can get fooled a little bit and bite a little too hard in zone coverage when his eyes are on the quarterback. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's probably going to be his main issue in the NFL.
Well, I think that this does help when you have maybe one of the greatest all-time NFL teachers at teaching the cornerback position and staying clean over the top specifically. That's Coach Carroll's bread and butter. How many 9 routes did we get hit with last year, Brendan? Can you think of one 9 route that we got hit with last year?
I can't. Let me think here. No. Kind of wish we did sometimes. Sometimes it's better to give up 80 yards than to give it up 8 yards at a time. But
You
yeah,
you just touched on the important point from my standpoint of this. The worries of aggressiveness are not worries that we should be really leaning on, because just like what Brendan said on this, it's good to prevent the big play. But when there's the obsession with preventing the big play at the cost of making big plays underneath from time to time, and that's the whole choice you're making as a defense, which I think we really especially made last year at a real strong level, to say we're going to make you earn everything up the football field. And this has allowed drives to just slowly inch their way up the field bit by bit. But you're going to get, with his aggressiveness, him jumping route, you're going to get him getting interceptions. And I think that the Seahawks, with the way that the offenses have exploded in the modern era, we're no longer in the 80s or 90s era of how many points are being scored. Points are scored all over the place. And you've got to now just allot for the fact that even the best defenses are going to get scored upon, because the rules have been slanted in that direction to allow for that. So the worry about the big play, to me, from time to time, that's got to be something that it's not got to be something. It'd be something I would love to see, that we are able to maybe put a little bit more in the back seat. It can be still something we keep in the consideration. I'm not saying go whole hog wild here, but that, the preventative aspect of things and kind of always playing to not to lose is a little bit what I translate with that at times in how we play our coverages, where everything's really super soft, marshmallowy, pillowy soft, and you're just never really pressing things up at the forefront of it on the routes. And then that allows for those short, easy completions that drives all the fans crazy, with those long, never-ending drives in our defense on the football field for 70 plays over the course of a game. I think the aggressiveness is going to be great. Is it going to be exploited from time to time? Yeah. Is it going to be exploited most in his rookie year, as he's learning of when the times he can pull and when he can't pull and when he needs to stay on that? Yeah, but that's when you have Coach Carroll, who is the absolute guru when it teaches cornerbacks. And beyond that is the guru at teaching how to stay clean over the top. There is no better coach. That's not hyperbole on my part, is it not, Brendan? I mean, it's not hyperbole. There's maybe some better cornerback coaches in NFL history, but there's been no essentially cornerback coach that teaches his corners better at staying over the top and staying clean.
No, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah. So I think it'll be okay. I don't think it'll be as much of an issue as some may. I get where they're coming from on it. He certainly has that aggressiveness all over his tape, but he also has makeup speed. That's also where you mentioned 4.3. Yeah, I think he probably does have 4.3. He's got 4.3 football speed, and that he's like Tariq Woolen last year, where he's catching up to people and he's behind 4 or 5 steps at times and gets there before the ball does. And you're like, oh, okay, he's got that gear.
Yeah. I don't think he has as much recovery speed as Tariq, though. Like, Tariq can make way more mistakes and make up for it in a way that I don't think Witherspoon quite can. But I do think he's faster than a lot of people are giving him credit for. If you read some of the scouting reports from before the draft, a lot of people were acting as if he was like a 4.5 guy, with how, like, oh, if he gets beat, it's over. He'll never catch him. I don't think that's true.
No, I think with Tariq too, he's 6'3" and he's long as hell, and he's also 4.26. So I'm saying, like you mentioned, 4.38. I think probably like 4.35 if he was healthy, he'd run a 4.35. But that's still a far cry from 4. To your point, far cry from 4.26, and he's not got the length and he's not got the size. So those are two other aspects that do help Tariq when he's trying to make up on a play and get back to the ball. And he's not going to have that necessarily, but he's got better change of direction, I think, than Tariq does. He can stop and start faster than Tariq can.
Yeah, that's got to be true. His change of direction stuff is pretty insane. It's got to be better. It's better than most players. But yeah, I did want to watch that Indiana game, because that was the one game where he kind of he gave up some stuff. I think he gave up, over 100 yards in coverage. He got targeted 13 times. Still only allowed 6 receptions, actually. And there were 2 40-yard plays, and then there was like a 9-yard curl route on the last drive of the game. Other than that, it was all short stuff that doesn't even really matter that much. He had one really nice play in that game, and this is something I saw in his tape on Minnesota as well, where he reads the screen coming, and then he just darts through the wall of blockers and lays a big hit almost immediately to just stop the back in his tracks. He's really good at that kind of stuff. Just plays where he just takes off as soon as the ball is snapped. He's like, I'm reading screen here. I'm just going to go for it. And he's right.
He's incredibly instinctive, to your point on that. He's very aware on the football field of what's going on, and he's going to play the run. Let's not undersell this part too. You talk about, we need help in the run game. We need guys that can come and make more plays. He's not going to solve everything for you, but when you keep adding these defenders, here's a Bobby, here's a Devon Witherspoon, Here's another guy over here that you're starting to kind of now get a bit of a better crew in there to be able to stop that stuff up. And whether it comes to screen game or running or outside zone runs or pitch plays outside, he's going to get off his block, come up and make the play. Teams are not going to be able to just easily get that now on the edge with their block.
Yeah, according to PFF, I think he missed somewhere around like 20 tackles in 4 years in college out of 157 total tackles, which I'm not surprised that he occasionally misses a tackle because his arms are kind of short, but overall, that's not bad at all.
Well, he's also putting his nose in there in a lot of tackles where other cornerbacks would be making business decisions.
Right, right. But he did pick up 6 penalties defensively last year. So he is going to have to be a little less handsy because in the pros, they don't let you get away with that as much as you do in the college. So there might be some penalties this rookie year. There might be some getting beat over the top this rookie year. But I'm going to be I think it's probably for the best if we go ahead and deal with that and try to get the good stuff out of him too. And there's going to be, I think, plenty of good stuff. This guy played, let me see here, 2,300 snaps over the last 4 years on defense. So he's pretty ready to go. He should be pretty ready to go for NFL action.
And as you're saying, with the absent the Indiana game, every single game he was on point, and he didn't give up one touchdown on the season. Yes, there's other stuff we can look at with size and length and stuff, but those are pretty pro-ready numbers for a player coming on the scene where you would think off of that, this guy should be probably pretty ready to at least hold up at a league average level on the outside. Those are outstanding numbers. That quarterback rate, all across the board is just outstanding. So, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be a stardom guy like Tariq was last year in that way. That's such a high watermark to hit, but he'll be solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and by the way, that Illinois defense, they have other good players, but it's not exactly a stacked unit. Like they had a few defensive backs get drafted this year, right? With,
I had love for Sidney Brown, or you're going to my Sidney Brown love here, Brendan.
Yeah, like they had Sidney Brown, and then they had the one cornerback. Was it Jatavius Martin? Was his name?
Brown,
something like that. And they do actually have one highly recruited defensive lineman that's probably going to go really high in the next draft.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a stacked unit. He's their best player by far this last year, and they were the best defense in the league.
There's your other statistic I think that stands out. Best defense in all of college football. And he didn't do it himself, but this is the big part of why they were at that spot, why they were this good. He was a keynote member here of them. I think this guy's going to be ready to go. And is he going to get to start him? I don't know. And maybe his top end is just that of being a really well above average corner on the outside that can play a bunch of different coverages. But and tackle as good as any cornerback in the league. Even that skill set would be mighty helpful to the Seahawks and would be better than what they've been getting out of the position of recent times.
And other than maybe that 1 year Brandon Browner made the Pro Bowl, he has a very good chance of very quickly becoming the best number 2 corner we've had with Carroll, right?
Well, now I've been going back to this concept almost, Brendan, as I've been, got these many decades in as a Seahawks fan now. And I can't think back to a time period where we ever had 2 corners like this at this point. Browner was good. And you're right. Maybe he's the closest you could find as a comparison. But absent that, there is no spot in Seahawks history where you have 2 guys at this kind of level that they might be playing at. And then what does that mean for the defense? What does that bring to the defense as far as how that helps them now and steps forward? It'll be very interesting, I think, to monitor that and how this plays out, especially this modern NFL age where everything's about passing.
Right. So pro comp, I know you had one. I had a hard time finding one because he plays unlike most other corners that I'm familiar with. Yeah. But you had one that was pretty good. So give it to us.
It would be Darius Slay with Antoine Winfield's tackling was basically would be because like you said, it's hard to put this one together. And if I have a hard one putting it together, then I'd usually do a kind of a combo comp to put it together to make it work. But I do feel very strongly about, that one. He can do probably more zone stuff than even Darius Slay could. Darius is really a pure man guy for me to the most part. Does a little bit of zone stuff, but the tackling is way above Darius Slay. That's why I can't just go Darius pure because his tackling is pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I'm willing to go with that one because I can't really think of anything better than that. He's an unconventional kind of player, I think. You don't see a lot of sub 6 foot cornerbacks that are this good at tackling and hit this hard and are this impenetrable in man defense.
Yeah, it's an unusual skill set. You'll find the man guy who's tight and covered, but then he's finessey and he doesn't want to tackle and he's, turning up his nose at that stuff. But this guy's not just a merely good tackler. That'd be underselling this. He is a dominant tackler from the cornerback position, if that's a possible thing. We're going to make that a thing, or he's going to make that a thing.
All right. So that was our first rounder. Now let's turn the page to our second first rounder. And this was one that polarized people in my experience. There were a decent few people who immediately just loved this pick. They fell in love with it. They were amazed by it. But there were definitely some people who didn't really get it. I think there were definitely some people who didn't really understand what the point was. And I definitely do. I definitely do. I don't love this pick either, for whatever it's worth. It's not my favorite pick that we made. But it has an opportunity to make a big impact on this team for the next few years. Absolutely. It's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver from Ohio State. So I'll give him the measurements. I'll give the testing, and then you just tell us about the player. Give us the rundown on what he is. So he's going to be 21 years old when the season starts, so he's still young. And by the way, it was great to see so many 22-year-olds and 21-year-olds in this draft class, especially at the top. That was great to see. 6'1", which puts him in the 37th percentile for wide receivers. Not bad. 196 pounds, 36th percentile for receivers. Short arms, 30.5 inches. He's got T-Rex arms, 14th percentile. 9-inch hands, small hands, got 20 percentile hands. The vertical's okay, 35 inches. That puts him in the 44th percentile. His broad is nice, 10 feet, 5 inches, 75th percentile. But where he kind of broke the internet a little bit would be with his 3-cone and his 20-yard shuttle. 3-cone was 6'5'7", 96th percentile. One of the fastest ever. And the 20-yard shuttle was 3'9'3", 97th percentile. That is freaky quickness. That is freaky change of acceleration. And that does a good amount of work to tell us what kind of player we're dealing with here. But what is JSN going to do for us on a football field?
Well, it's that certainly, as I've been harping on, testing scores not carrying the day, but there's times that they should inform you. If they inform you back to the tape, and that short area burst, that short area quickness, the change of direction, these are the important traits for the receiver that is going to operate almost solely from the inside. We can talk in a second about him on the outside, but I do think I agree with most of the pundits that say that this is a guy that's going to be operating in the inside. That's where you're going to do. Occasionally, maybe you'll put him to the outside, but he should be aligned into the slot. And that change of direction, that type of stuff, when you're moving around through the slot, you're sometimes navigating traffic. So it's linebacker coming here. Can I bounce around that linebacker? Or is he going to be able to lay a hat on me and stop me in my tracks? Can I get to the spot I need to get to quickly to sit down in the zone that's only going to be opened up 2 seconds exactly after the snap? And I've got to get to that spot and it'll be wide open, but I got to get to that place on the football field by that point. These are things that are different than the guys on the outside that you want with the long speed and to have that length with their arms and that type of stuff. It's a different skill set. It just is. And it's one that has grown bigger in nature in the NFL, Brendan, over specifically, I'd say even the last 5 years. With the rise of these guys that have become at times like almost running backs, which I don't think they're going to do as much with him like you see necessarily with Kupp in the running back realm. I think they'll try to kind of pair that with like a McIntosh or a, who knows, Eskridge or something on some of that stuff with just the fly sweep bubble screen. He can do that stuff, of course, but it's really with him moving the chains where he's going to get the first downs on third down. He's always going to be open. It's 7-11, 24/7, always open. His hands are really good. He can catch it out away from his body. Of course, last year, Brendan, he had the hamstring injury, which really robbed him last season. But this is to Seahawks' benefit because if he's not having the hamstring injury last year and he puts up another season close to the one he put up the previous year, probably going to be a top 12 pick at that point. He's not lasting all the way to 20. So you benefited by that. And hamstring injury is not ACL where it's going to last forever. He should be able to recover from that. So the previous year, he put up 1,595 yards, Brendan. And in looking at it, he had a 91 grade offensively. a 91.9 receiving grade from PFF. And a lot of it came at the end of that year. He was really coming on at the end of the season. He was good throughout. It wasn't that he was bad throughout, but looking like the last 5 games, 240 yards receiving, 139 yards receiving, 105, 127. And then he capped it off finally with that Rose Bowl performance, 336 yards. So he was really at that final point. He was really clicking in. It was really starting to come together for him. I do see, as I said, only as a slot guy here and what he can bring to the table, but this is the rise of the slot now in the NFL. This is the position that's becoming a rise to its prominent point. And now you're investing in that a little bit if you're the Seahawks. And I can get a little bit of the people that are a little bit hesitant to really fully embrace this pick, like you say. I get those. I have had some of those same kind of twists and turns a little bit on this one. But the value of the pick, if you go back and look at where everybody had this guy in their value board, from consensus boards to whoever you want to go to, everybody had them for the most part much higher up than where we picked him here. So you can't argue the value standpoint of it. You can't argue that he's going to have a lot of room to operate underneath there, Brendan, when he's got DK and Tyler on the outside, taking up those double teams, taking the cover 2 looks, where he's going to have at times maybe even a linebacker that he's got to get free against. And he's going to be eaten all day long. And with a guy like Geno Smith, he's not a force feeder. We saw that last year. When Marquise Goodwin was starting to roll, he'd go to Goodwin. He didn't need to just sit there and go DK or Tyler. Those were when he had those guys, the only guys to throw to, he would. But when he's got somebody that's legitimate, like he had with Goodwin at times last year in the slot, he'll work him as well. And so I think he's going to find his share of touches. He does struggle a little bit as a run blocker. I looked in deep on that as well, Brennan. So he's not the greatest run blocker. You are going to be taking a bit of a step back to me if you're going to go out of the 2 tight end sets to 3 wides with him because of that. But he's got body control, good hands, catches the ball away from his body. He can leap. He's good after the catch. He's got great vision in the open field, and he makes really smart cuts to get to the proper place, both in his route running and with the ball in his hands to kind of, extend those plays a little bit. He's not sensational. He's not Golden Tate-like or, some just next level with it, but he's good. He's solid. And I go Amon St. Brown. That's my comp with him.
Yeah. So one thing that should be pointed out here in 2021, when he had almost 1,600 receiving yards in 13 games, like you were talking about just a second ago, we should talk about the other receivers he was competing with for catches on that Ohio State team. They had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And watching some of the JSN tape, it was annoying sometimes because JSN would get wide open, but Stroud's, of course, looking to make the big play with Wilson and Olave. And it makes you wonder, what would JSN have done if he actually played football this year healthy? Because both those guys were gone, and he would have been the clear number 1 receiver, and there would have been a Marvin Harrison Jr., and they have a tight end that's kind of on the rise in Cade Stover. I think that's his name, Cade Stover. But it might have been, because Stroud was still there, it might have been like a 2,000-yard season for all we know. It could have been something absolutely insane.
Might have been, because I think Marvin Harrison would have been on the outside. And as we saw with Marvin, he was going to take up the double team. And then you're going to still have Jackson underneath. And then they had Abuka, another guy you didn't mention, but that's another guy who very well ended up being drafted as a receiver for them in the upcoming years. And so they would have been him, still allowed him to operate probably within the slot. Maybe we would have gotten to see a little bit more of him on the outside at that point. But yeah, I think he definitely would have feasted this last year. And it's got to be stressful at times for CJ Stroud in some of those meeting rooms, Brendan, where he, he's got the receivers like, can I get a target? It's like, I got Marvin Harrison Jr. over here. What do you want me to do? Junior. I'm trying to get drafted, man.
Yeah. So also about the slot versus lining up outside thing, his first year at OSU, he actually lined up wide more than he lined up in the slot. It was 84 wide, 78 in the slot. And he didn't do that much. There might be a correlation there. 2021, which was his big year, he lined up wide 80 times. And then he lined up in the slot 562 times. So it doesn't take a genius to see where he's going to be best. He wasn't graded out terribly as a run blocker, and I was actually watching his game against Oregon in 2021, which was a big game for him. He had 7 catches for 145 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. I was surprised with how often he was being used as the lead blocker on a bubble screen. And he wasn't great or anything. He's not Hines Ward. He's not Muhsin Muhammad, but he was like, okay, they're actually putting him in that role, and he's not embarrassing himself. That's kind of nice to see, I guess. But I would have expected him to be the one getting the ball and Chris Olave to be the one blocking for him. So that kind of surprised me.
Yeah, that is a little bit of a shocker. I mean, his grade wasn't great. 2021, he was 63.3 as a run blocker, and then last year in the small sample size of snaps, he was 56.6. But
Mhm.
the previous year, and I guess in the 87 snaps he had there, he was a little better. That's another sample size, a little bit on that one, but I didn't see him he didn't look, ferocious in that respect. I think you are going a little bit back to if you got the two tight ends that you leaned a little more on last year, you ran it at as higher rate as anybody in the NFL, and now you go to those three wides. It'll be at the benefit of the passing offense, but you may also at that point take a bit of a half step in those kind of formational points as far as running the football. Then with that, I think.
Mhm. But yeah, the thing that stands out more than anything with JSN, I think, is he just understands how to get open against zone coverage. When you do zone defense against JSN, he knows how to find the empty area. He knows how to get there. He knows how to get open. He's an elite route runner and he's got elite quickness, so he's always going to be able to get open fast because of that. Um, he does have a really good release package for the college level. I don't know how it's going to work in the NFL because his arms are so short, but in the college level, at least the few times he did get pressed, he dealt with it okay, I think. I don't think it's going to translate terribly well, but for whatever that's worth, that's what it is.
And
Go ahead.
the slot does get usually the slot gets the free
Right.
release because
Right.
they're in motion and they're your yard off the line of scrimmage most times.
Exactly. Really good acceleration. He doesn't have top end speed, which we'll talk about in a second here, and that's kind of his problem, his issue as a player. But he does accelerate up to his top speed really quickly. He's really good at like using his footwork to deceive defenders to gain leverage and get open, even though he isn't really able to outrun them. Like that's one thing that I noticed. Like I was watching the Oregon tape, he had like a seam route, 26-yard touchdown against Oregon, where he just kind of sets up the defender and he's just past him. And
Mhm.
he doesn't have the foot speed to actually outrun him, but he just kind of manages to get him thinking. I think he was going outside, and then he just cuts up the seam and it's just gone. You do see those reps where where he's in man coverage and he just can't build separation because he's not fast enough. But a good percentage of the time he manages to overcome it because he is such a good route runner. He is so quick. He does have such good change of direction. So
It's kind
I
of
was
like it's kind of like his change of direction sort of makes the defenders make him fast, right? Like you're talking about in that one play with Oregon where the defender's thinking he's going to cut in. This guy's killed me by 1,000 cuts throughout this game on this in cutting route. I'm going to take it away on this play. Jackson feels it, and he's got maybe an option around with CJ to go over the top then on a stop and go, if he sees it like that. And that's where now suddenly he's really fast because he's got a linebacker coming to a dead stop thinking the in cutting route's coming. And he's set it up over the course of a game in that way.
he had 6 career drops on 133 total targets. So really good hands, good
Mhm.
hands catcher, natural hands catcher, no problem. He's got really good, like, it's almost like running back vision, I think, where he can see the field and change
Mhm.
the direction so he can get yards after the catch really effectively. That's something that I noticed when I was watching him. Even though he only really has 1 year in the NFL, he looks pretty pro ready to me. Like I look at him and I don't see somebody who's like, oh, this guy's a couple years away because he only has one full college season. No, I think he's pretty ready to go, which surprised me a little bit.
So the nice thing I think you got with a lot of these picks in this draft, Brendan, and certainly this one and Witherspoon, this is the case where I haven't found a better way to put this, but you're getting to some of their floor while still having some future ceiling available to you. Whereas a lot of times you have to make a call on a prospect between one of those other things when you're drafting him. Oh, I'm gonna go for the floor. Oh, I'm gonna go for the ceiling. Here you're getting a little bit of both because I agree he's ready to go. It would not surprise me in the least, Brendan, if he slides in next year and becomes a top 5 slot in this league. Puts up
Mhm.
55, 60, 65 catches.
Yeah, very possible. He's really good at tracking deep balls. I felt like even though he doesn't have elite top speed, I think that when he does get down there, he tracks the ball really well. Kind of
Mhm.
like we see with Lockett. Lockett doesn't have elite speed anymore, but he's so good at tracking the deep ball, he still makes a lot of plays like that.
Agreed. As route running will allow him, the body control, the route running is about you mentioned footwork. That's another part of it. Pro receivers, ex NFL receivers will tell you this. I think I was watching tape today of Steve Smith talking about this. Speed is nice to have and it's helpful, but it's not the end all be all when it comes to the football field. I do have hesitancies with him thinking he'll be able to go on the outside because the combination of speed with the arm length, but moved into the slot, he's got plenty of speed to operate from within there. And he does have the short area burst. He does have the most important skills you'd want out of the slot. Like you mentioned, he's almost bringing near record numbers as far as his testing scores and those respective things. And those weight more heavily to me for guys inside like that.
Also, really good in contested catch situations. He's got great body control. Those situations where he's tightly covered, but he still makes the catch. I saw a lot of that with him.
Yeah.
I did watch like the tape of the Rose Bowl that you were talking about, where he had 340 yards or whatever it was. And there's a lot of that going on here. He's tightly covered. It's in the back of the end zone. He's falling out of the end zone, and he finds a way to bring it in.
Clark
So,
Clark Phillips had him for a lot of that game.
yeah,
And that guy
yeah,
just win
that
this.
was,
We just win this last draft. Remember, he was that small 5'9" kid out of Utah,
yeah.
and yeah, he was torching him in this game. I think he went 4th round or something in this last draft.
hmm So I only really watched those 2 games with him because when you're looking for like problems with a player, you're not really going to see that on the tape with JSN because Ohio State just doesn't put him in that situation, really, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they know he's a slot guy, so they're not going to put him on the outside, especially when they got Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave out there. He doesn't have great top end speed, but he doesn't really need it. There are some reps where you can see him like, okay, he's not really getting open against man coverage here, but other than that, it's not like you can find like the game where he was bad. Like there's no game where like, oh, he dropped 4 passes or he had 3 fumbles or anything like that. So I just watched those 2 games and I felt like I got a really good idea of what makes this guy interesting as a player.
Yeah, I think you can come to a pretty quick evaluation point with him because of that. What he does well shows up very quickly and fast to where, okay, I can see it. And what maybe he's missing, you can also see pretty readily apparent.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean he's a bad player, doesn't have some top end. This is the slot is more important than ever. And we can't look at it with 2003 eyes or 1985 eyes. We got to look at it with the slot has become a new thing now. It's become so very important to modern offenses.
Yeah. In that Utah game, by the way, I saw him run the old Baldwin corner route, where he's in the slot and then he goes like towards the back corner of the end zone. I
Skinny
saw the
post.
Baldwin route. Yeah, kind of like the skinny post. I always called it the Baldwin route because I can remember him
I
running it a
like
couple
Baldwin
times in the
route
Super
better.
Bowl.
That's
Yeah.
much more catchier.
And he actually saw a few snaps, and this was something that almost never happened with him in college. But in that game, they actually had him catching out of the backfield like 3 times. Do you think that could be part of his game at the pro level?
Yeah, that's because that's Cooper Cup. We were seeing it all. How many times did they run that in the Super Bowl against the Bengals? They didn't always start this way at the Cup at the Rams, but over the years here, he's become a guy out of the backfield now, and it challenges teams because you've got it. If you have another slot out there, Brendan, the slot corner picks that slot up. Cooper Cup's aligned out as a running back, so now the responsibility goes to a linebacker. No linebackers covering Cooper Cup. But what do you do from a dictation of matchups then if you're the defense at that point? If they come out in that alignment, do you bring out the extra corner and take the linebacker off the field then? So you put some weird mismatches on the defense when you put that guy into it. But the Vikings picked this up with Jefferson when they put him into this role last year. That was their new adaptation last year with him and why he had even a little bit more, I think, production than he's been putting up recently last year because they featured him in that same way. So yeah, you're going to have him a lot of times in the backfield at 3rd down situations where he'll go out like that because they're trying to force a linebacker mismatch with him in coverage, and it'll work.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. He ran. It was like he caught 2 dump offs out of the backfield, and then he ran. I think they call it like the Texas route, where you start in the backfield and then you go to one side and then you kind of cross over the middle of the field. I think it's called the Texas route.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Fred Jackson ran it for us a few times the year he was with the Seahawks back in like 2016 or something. Always kind of like that play, one of my favorites.
I do
And
too.
it
You
was
usually can
something.
run. You can run the defenders out like flood zone. You can run the first defenders out with your first couple of guys, and then they're peeling and the guy's peeling to the back, and it's sometimes we're just wide open, like 10 yards
Mhm.
open.
Yeah. So I'm wonder like that was something that he almost never did at OSU, but in the pros, maybe he'll end up being kind of like not only that, but do you think there's any potential for like fly sweep type stuff with him?
I'm a little more reticent on this stuff. I'm a little more pessimistic with this. I think he can occasionally do it, but I think that when you have guys like Derick Young and Kenny McIntosh and potentially Eskridge on the roster, those guys are all going to be significantly better, I think, in pulling that off.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably fair, but that did catch my eye because he only lined up in the backfield a handful of times during his entire time there, and then suddenly in that Rose Bowl, that's how they're using him. And it kind of got me excited because I know that Waldron probably wants to do that stuff. It's the McVay offense, right? That's where he comes from. the
And
Cooper
again,
Cup offense.
and as Cooper Cup has had to do, been used as they've used, I think that they want to take a page out of that book. Don't just take the Rams offense on like a buffet. Take everything: entree, main course, dessert. And this is take if it's working for them and teams don't have an answer. I think even the Lions were doing it with Amon Brown too at times. So this is another new kind of thing that's been implemented in the league here. So I don't know why my camera's being weird, by the way. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that happens all the time. It just doesn't focus in on the right thing. I have to deal with that sometimes too.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. But yeah, so JSN, pretty simple player. You can easily tell what makes him good, where he has some shortcomings, and how you can easily mask those shortcomings and get the best out of him. And it's going to be really simple. Kind of like with Devon Witherspoon, we need to run more man defense. Last year, we ran man defense approximately 10% of the time, which was third fewest in the league. This year, I think we need to be running it at like 30, 35, maybe even 40% of the time to take advantage of what we got. Likewise with JSN. Last year, we ran 3 receiver formations about, I think, 46% of the time, which was 6th fewest in the league on neutral downs. And that's got to go up. We got to be pushing up to like 65, 70 maybe if we're going to get the most out of JSN. So do you think we can do it?
I think I've got a lot of confidence that they're going to make that transition, upping that ante, Brendan. And would you not think this is also probably the case in the respect of, yes, you did last year lean so much into the 2 tight ends rather than the 3 wide receivers, but you also did so because Dwayne Eskridge couldn't keep on the football field. Penny Hart didn't jump forward. Derick Young was still really young. And Marquise Goodwin seemed to be good for about a half a season. So that left you in a point of, do we go with the strength of these 2 tight ends and how 3 tight ends and how good that's been for us? Do we go to the rookie and Derick Young out there to get it done for us? And so now that I think they actually have a talent out there that's ready to go and who can be productive immediately, well, that's going to dictate let's run some more of that. I just hope what they do, Brendan, is that they assess the opponent every given week. Who is the opponent that's good in base? Who's the opponent that's bad in base? Who's the opponent that can't run, that wants to stay out of nickel as often as possible? We're forcing them in nickel 24/7 this game. You've got between the 2 tight end sets and now with Jaxon Smith, Brendan, you can attack any given opponent in any way you want to do so to go after their main weakness. And you're built in a way to do that that's unique, where most NFL teams offensively wise, we're going to take it to how we take it to every other defense. You have a way to change that a little bit here, but that's going to be on the Seahawks to be able to shift that a little bit from Waldron. It's going to speak a lot to Waldron and his ability this year if he does do it or not, or if he just goes in every week and goes, we're going to do the same thing, because you've got a roster to adjust here. Maybe there should be some weeks, Brendan, where you only run 20 snaps of Jaxon, 25 snaps of Jaxon, because you want to just hammer those 2 tight end sets. You just want to come downhill on defenses all day.
Yeah, and by the way, I said Devon again. It's Devon. I'm aware.
I'm not tearing you up on it. I know that Seattle they'll be vicious with that stuff, but it's hard, folks. It gets set in your mind one way, and it's not easy to just twist it off.
So you said Amon-Ra St. Brown for him.
I feel pretty close. I really think that's the solid comp for him.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe he's more like a rich man's version of Amon-Ra St. Brown because he was so much more highly touted coming out? Like, do you think there's anything about him that like stands out beyond St. Brown?
Not really. I mean, I really don't think so. No. I mean, I want to say yes, but I feel like I'll be lying to you a bit if I did. And when I came to Amon Brown, I went, no, that's just what he is. He's Amon St. Brown. He's not Cooper Cup. They don't have the same way they do what they do, and for good and bad. But he has that kind of athleticism and that way of that ignition and that change of direction and all that stuff just reminded me of Amon.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason why I ask is because there were a lot of people pre-draft that had him as a top 10 player in this draft, which I never really saw. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so I'm trying to like understand what they see with him that makes them think that he's that level of prospect. Like if you're saying he should go in the top 10, then you're saying that he should be a multiple time all-pro receiver in this league. You're saying he should be not quite Calvin Johnson, but not terribly far away from that either in terms of quality. I like the pick. I think the pick is good. I think the pick can help us. But I have wondered, like, what do people see in this guy to be so much more than even somebody like a Marvin Mims or Rashee Rice or Parker Washington or other slot receivers that were in this draft who I really liked, who you could have gotten in the third, maybe even fourth round. And I still don't know if I see it.
I don't think you're off in the respect of would you have gotten 90% from Parker Washington or one of these other guys down if you're looking for a slot only, versus what you get from Jackson. And I think it's a valid question to ask. He's going to a great college. He's got CJ Stroud throwing him the rock. He's got two guys on the outside taking attention away from him, and he had that just 1 year of production. I think the answer would be, if I may on it, I don't know if there's parts of me that are with you on this with this. So it's not that I feel this wholly, but maybe it's a little bit of the reassessment of the value of the slot receiver in the NFL. And you look at Amon St. Brown and you go, well, Amon St. Brown's just the fourth. Yeah, but Amon St. Brown is a lot of ways the centerpiece of that Lions offense. A Lions offense last year that was as explosive as any offense in the NFL. A Lions offense that converted more third downs than any team in the NFL. And that's becoming a bigger part of these offenses now. And from Jefferson and Cooper Kupp, these are the guys now that as they operate only from the slot that are becoming and rising to prominence. As we devalue certain positions, Brendan, like middle linebacker and safety, there's other positions that are now growing value. And specifically beyond just receiver, slot receiver is one to me that is, as any position on the football field in this modern era, is growing more in value by the year and by the way the offenses are running their systems.
Yeah, and that thing you said about third down conversion is big. That's the main reason why I like this pick. I made a video a couple weeks ago talking about the correlation between the elite offenses in this league and the elite third down converting teams in this league. It's very, very strong. Mm-hmm. And the Seahawks were one of the few teams last year that were an aberration because they had a good offense, but they were bad on third down. Hard to replicate that. So if you want to be good on offense again, you probably need to start converting your third downs.
100%, especially that you're running an offense that stylings are built around converting third downs. That is the thing with the West Coast offense. I mean, at its tenets and core, you're going out on first down, and more often than not, by how Bill Walsh used to dictate it, or Holmgren, or anybody, take any guys that run this, Andy Reid, first down, we're probably going to pass because or we're going to pass at a higher rate than a lot of other teams because the general numbers tell you that defenses are gearing up to stop the run. And we're going to throw a little 4-yard route. And then we're going to get a couple yards here. And we're going to get ourselves into third and short situations, which are now you're in less. And we saw this with us last year at times. You find yourself, if you run this offense purely, in a lot of those 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 4s. And now those are the routes that become almost unguardable, undefendable when you're talking about the slot in those situations. He only needs 5 yards and he can run an option route and he can field the coverage to one side and then just break off to the other side and get wide open. And the quarterback will read it and hit it to him in the same way when they get synced up. So it is an elemental part, yes, in the modern era. It's an elemental part in the great offenses, as you spoke about in the studies that you did on it. And it's also an elemental part in this exact type of offense that we do run.
And because of that, I think this pick can definitely work. But we're going to have to see if they implement things properly to get the most out of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So now we're going to turn the page to day number 2, where the Seahawks made 2 selections. They had 3 picks. They traded 1 for a pick next year. But they did make both of their second-round selections, and we're going to wrap up this stream by talking about these 2 guys and what they are bringing to the table. We're going to start with our 37th overall selection. This is Derick Hall of Auburn, an edge rusher. Probably going to play outside linebacker in this defense, which was by and large the role he played at Auburn. So good fit. I'll read off his measurements here real quick. 22 years old, another younger guy. 6'3", let's call it. So as far as edge players go, he's actually one of the shorter ones, 21st percentile. Although I do want to say that's not necessarily a bad thing if he's going to be standing up, which he is. Yeah. 254 pounds also puts him in like the 26th percentile. Again, not a bad thing. You don't want him trying to do coverage drops when he weighs 270 or something like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. 34 and a half inch arms. Really good there. 84th percentile. He's got long arms as far as edge rushers go. 10-inch hands, 60th percentile. Tested very well. Better than I even remembered. His 4.55 40 was 94th percentile, one of the fastest 40 times they have for an edge rusher. 1.59 10-yard split was 87th percentile, so really good acceleration too. His vertical was average, 33 and a half inches, but his broad jump was great. 10'7", 93rd percentile. So tell me a little bit about Derick Hall.
Well, he's a power edge, Brendan. There's been some comps out there, for instance, with Cliff Averill, which I went back and double checked. That's just not apropos. Those guys, they won two different ways. So the Cliff Averill comp, and Averill was a 1.51, by the way. How insanely quick was he back in the day? 1.51 he posted for his 10-yard split.
Did not know
Um,
that.
Yeah, that was I was because I was looking up because I have seen a couple comps with people trying to put that together with Derick Hall. Power, strength, grown man strength, an ability to absolutely bully tackles in a fashion to make you believe and think he'll continue to do this at the pro level. Is he going to be dominant with it? We'll see if he's able to be dominant with that as his main attribute. But I do think that in some fashion or another, that strength and power will still translate to the NFL level. He's doing this at the SEC. He's doing the toughest conference in the land. And he's doing up against guys that are going to be playing on Sundays where they're just overwhelmed snap after snap with him off the snap. It's the heavy hands and then sustained strength and power, Brendan. Sometimes you get the heavy hands and then the strength wanes, or you get no heavy hands and then they just sort of will eventually kind of work them down a little bit over the course of the play. With him, it's heavy hands and he can sustain it all the way through the play. But he's not got a lot of pass rushing moves. It's mainly bull rush. He then goes to the long arm after he's got the bull rush set in. And so now he's really got that tackle leaning to one side of the edge. And he really tries, because he's so strong and so long with it, that it's hard on those tackles if it's just that one arm. They can't fight off of it. And so then once he gets the tackle starting to kind of lean in now a little bit to that outside shoulder to deal with the long arm, he'll then bounce back inside on a jab step. And it's kind of those 1, 2, 3 moves that he works off of to make it go and to get his pass rush done. And he's effective with it. It's something to grow off of. He needs to get more, Brendan. That's obviously not enough just on itself, but it's something. Some guys come in like Collier types that have zero any, pass rush as far as they got with that. But he's actually got a couple things with that. He's at times, I think he's going to be better as a run defender at the pros than he was in college. That kind of went back and forth with him at times where it wasn't bad, but he wasn't as dominant as I think he should have been with his strength and his power, in that respect of things. He plays with a lot of high effort. He's going to be a great rally to the ball defender, especially with those quickness, speed, explosive scores you talked about. Like he stays in and on in every play. He's just a good overall player. And I think that he's going to, be probably solid for the rotation. I don't know I'm still a little unsure of where his top end lies, Brendan. The 1.59, 10-yard split's great, but like measure that up against a Cliff Averill. The first step quickness it's kind of there. Like I said, it's good. 87th percentile. It's solid. But you do go to it and go, okay, is it just power that you're going to have in your bag? Is that kind of the only thing you're going to be able to go through here? Or are you going to develop more of your moves and then that you really work that through? That'll be the interesting thing to track with him. For instance, to me, Boye Mafe was a much closer comp, I think, to the Averill, because I think his 10-yard split was like 1.55 or something. So he's a lot closer in that realm. But he can zone drop okay too as well. It's not great. It's a work in progress with that too a little bit. It's not bad, but it's just a work in progress. But solid pick. I think his power is going to translate and at least get him a good collection of sacks every year. I don't know if it moves up his top end, but my comp is, I kept coming back to it. He's a little bit, maybe not as quite as big, maybe not quite as powerful, but Terrell Suggs to me was my comp for Derick Hall.
I think most people would be pretty happy with Terrell Suggs.
I think they would too as well. And I begrudgingly came to that comp because I couldn't find a clean and easy comp, because a lot of what I was seeing out there was for those twitchier Averill type guys that were the first step quickness guys. That Averill, if anything, wasn't power guy like this guy is. Averill was, I'm going to beat you to the edge and just get you loaded up on that first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that's notable with Derick Hall is that there's been a lot of instability on the Auburn coaching staff while he was there. I think they've been swapping out coaches like pretty much every year. And one thing that seemed to come up a lot when I was reading about him was that he didn't really get to develop as much as he could have because of that. Like he played in 47 games. He played almost 2,000 defensive snaps across 4 seasons. He put up, big numbers. He played a lot, but he didn't develop as much as he could have because of the instability on that coaching staff. So that makes me believe that he could have a higher ceiling than we're thinking, because of the fact that he just wasn't coached very well these first formative years. So I look at that and I kind of go, okay, he's already doing well. Mostly he just converts speed to power, right? That's his thing. He does the speed to power thing. He doesn't have a lot of pass rush moves. Sometimes it seems like he doesn't have a great pass rush plan, is the way they put it at times, where you're trying to get in there and you don't really have you're not thinking a few moves ahead with what you're going to do with your pass rush, right?
Setting them up and
you're not
doing
setting
those
them
type
up.
of things. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely not that kind of guy. It's very much just, I'm going to attack you and overpower you. And
Yeah.
that's absent those three things I said he goes to with the bull rush, long arm, jab, step inside. That's it. That's all you got.
Yeah. And the cerebral side of the game is currently not totally there yet. He doesn't read plays really well. Like, I watched every snap of defense against Arkansas 2 years ago, the 2021 season. And of course, they have KJ Jefferson. He's kind of a unique challenge because they're doing the read option stuff. But he looked very. There were parts in that game where I was like, he looks very unsure of what he's supposed to do, because he's like kind of spying KJ Jefferson, and he looks a little indecisive of when he's supposed to go, when he's supposed to. He ended up playing really well in this game, but there were some snaps where he just looked a little bit slow. And I look at that and I go, he's got some stuff to learn. Hopefully he can do it here, because he didn't do it at Auburn.
Yeah, and that makes sense with the coaching changes. New coaches coming in, and they're gonna. First thing is just they're trying to get their culture established and all that. That doesn't mean they're at a point of refining players always at the foremost when they're have that at the front of their mind. And you want this guy coming downhill. You don't want him thinking. The nice part being is mostly with those outside linebackers, that's just what you're having them do. So he's not always usually put in that situation. Read option situations would be one where you got to read it one way or the other. But I do think that he does have some top end potential here to him. The Terrell Suggs, I don't expect him to get to that side of it, but he can win as a player, I think, in the same way that Terrell Suggs won, where Suggs wasn't to be a real necessarily super first step quickness guy. He had enough quickness, but it was really coming down to he could overwhelm you with the power over the course of a game. And I think that Hall can do the very kind of same thing in the way, the nature of how he goes about it. I will say too, as well, as just a bold prediction on this, there were snaps on his tape of him playing inside. I went back and looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
He has played some inside, and he's played well when he's played inside from my snaps that I watched. So I think he can give you something in there a little bit too, in addition to that.
Yeah, I couldn't find those reps. And PFF, I looked at PFF. They have like a history of every snap he's ever played on their site. Almost every snap he played on the defensive line was outside the tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they said 53 snaps he played over that 4-year period were over the tackle. They only had 5 reps where he lined up as a defensive tackle. So you might have to show me these reps. I can't find them.
Yeah, I still got the tape on the ones I was looked at. So yeah, he had a couple of these he was breaking through in the backfield on. I was like, oh, okay. He looks comfortable in there. It kind of made me wonder why they didn't try to use him a little bit more inside at times, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Watching, like I said, I watched the Arkansas game. And sometimes it's like he's almost like his pass rush, it works. It's almost like he's meandering towards the quarterback. Like he's not, it's not like Myles Garrett or somebody like that. He's just kind of like meandering to the outside, and somehow he manages to get around the offensive tackle. And it's not great speed, but he does do a really good job of converting speed to power. That's one thing I noticed. He does have a little bit of bend, although not a lot. I like that he seems to understand leverage. He gets low when he's engaged. He knows how to use his long arms well. I like that kind of stuff. He's got strong, heavy hands, although I do think he needs to get better with his hands overall. I don't think he developed that area as well. Like, I thought Mafe was probably a little bit better coming out of college with his hands than Hall is right now. But some of that has to do with the lack of development, which we already kind of discussed. We know why that was the case. He's got good closing speed. I thought he was pretty good at his coverage drops. He kind of did some QB. They actually had some reps against Arkansas where he was doing like pure QB spy, where he would just line up as an inside linebacker and then just sit there and watch KJ, which I thought was kind of interesting that he was the guy they had do that. So I think that's a pretty good rundown of what he is. By the way, according to PFF, had 133 pressures in his college career on 927 pass rush reps. So that's a percentage of like 15%. Pretty good.
That's very good. He's like you say, though, he's just what he's basically doing is just mangling a guy into the backfield, and then he just locates the quarterback and goes and makes the pressure. It isn't, it isn't artistry, but it's effective.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of players like that, and not everybody's a Myles Garrett.
No, No, he can still be effective, and there's a lot of ways under the sun to win. You don't have to be just one certain way.
And actually, for whatever it's worth, it's not a huge sample size, but his numbers in coverage were quite good. He dropped back in coverage about 200 times over 4 years, only gave up like 19 catches for 125 yards, no
That is
touchdowns, one interception.
that is solid. That's
Hmm.
solid. And he didn't have anything bad in mind. He looked okay with it. It didn't look like it was horrible, but wasn't great. It was fine. We didn't think we asked our outside linebackers to do that much of that last year either.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the one final thing we need to talk about with Derick Hall, and this is something that I think was kind of a theme that recurred throughout the draft, was he was a team captain on a little bit of a messy team over there in Auburn. He was one of their team captains. He was one of their leaders. It seemed like we really liked players like that in this draft, the vocal leadership, positive character, positive locker room guys. And that was something that Tim Ruskell was really obsessed with that I think people got sick with, but there is, to an extent, you definitely do want to care about that stuff.
This would be a Tim Ruskell pick, to your point. Multiple years of playing college, big program, the team leader side of it. And that's not a bad way to go. It's just bad if you take it to an extreme degree that way. Just like it's bad going the other way if you take it to an extreme degree of just looking at talent and not looking at character. It's got to be a balance, I think. And we'll see if Seahawks are maintaining that balance or if they're just leaning wholly into Boy Scouts, because they did get a lot of Boy Scouts in this draft. Not a bad way, but you got a lot of guys that are all about ball. They're all about ball. They're going to do everything they can to be the best player that they possibly can be. There's no doubt about that. I do like this kid's story and background. He was a premature kid. I'm sure you've seen some of the tape on this.
Yeah.
Were born very, very much premature, like 5 months or something, I think, in the pregnancy, and given 1% chance to live. There was a story too about the college coach he was coming along and telling him, this ain't good enough what you're doing right now. You need to kick this in gear now, or we're pulling the scholarship offer for you with Auburn. And that coach lit that fire under him at that time. And by all accounts, that caused him to engage and to turn it on at that point and to understand that he's got to take this seriously. And so there's some real good things there with him and being that leader and showing that you're going to get a guy who's going to work his butt off. And he's got some natural ability with that, the 40 time, the explosive scores, the length, the power. There's something to work with here. And when you got that work ethic with that having something to work with, those are usually the good kind of recipe to creating at the very least, a solid player.
And also, I agree with you that I think he's going to be good against the run. That seems to be the concern that some people have. Oh, he's going to be bad against the run to start. I don't think so. I think he's got a really sturdy build. I think he's got good strength. When I watched the tape of the Arkansas game, that's the main game I've watched so far with him, I actually liked what I saw in terms of him holding up against the run. In Arkansas, they're going to challenge your run defense.
They are. It was weird to me too, Brendan. I saw that the numbers weren't great from PFF on his run grade necessarily, but the tape to me looked okay. I just thought he looked fine. He sets the edge. He plays with a high amount of effort too. He rallies the ball. If it gets past, he's rallying right back in after he sets the edge, or if he's got to come to the backside of the play, he's not just giving up. So I think he's going to be good in that respect. I do.
Let's see here. Henry Mars, thank you for the $2. Have too many outside linebackers. 6. Can one be converted to middle linebacker? That's not really how it works most of the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not, Henry. It's you got your 4, the magical 4 we know who are going to remain on the roster, and then it comes down to having one more extra. And so between Tyreek Smith and Alton Robinson and maybe some unforeseen, unnamed man who can come rise to prominence, you're carrying probably 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Tyreek gets released and maybe put on the practice squad, or maybe just released free.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't like Tyreek that much coming out, honestly, so I'm a little bit biased.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the fact that he's already had 2 major hip injuries. So I don't know, but it could go either way. But I don't think any of them can be converted to middle linebacker. That's not how it works.
No, it's just too late in the careers at this point to try to change into middle linebacker. And you don't really have anybody that would be fast or quick enough to where it would make sense to do so with that. So you're going to keep them all at OLB.
Yeah. Let's see here. Green 80, thank you for the $14 Canadian. Mike Morris said he played at Michigan at 298. Do you think he will play in the NFL at 300, maybe 305, 310? If he can put it together, he could be a monster. Go Hawks. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about weight earlier in the show. So here's another comment talking about it. Yeah, it's once you get to that weight of like being 300 pounds, I don't know how much more 5 or 10 pounds will do for you, honestly.
Yeah, agreed. I
Hmm.
I I think 295 is the magical weight because what you're doing here is you're historically in a 3-4 defense, your defensive ends are going to be what, Brendan, 275 to maybe 280, if we're looking at historically speaking. So what you're getting here with him when he's playing on early downs is a big 3-4 defensive end, even at 298, 295. So do you
Hmm.
want to make
Hmm.
him even bigger than big? Do we want to make him even larger than that? I don't think you would necessarily. You probably want him to still maintain some of that quickness inside that's going to aid him, with him already having enough size to be able to hold up against those guards and centers inside. So probably there's that magical weight that's the perfect spot for him with his size, weight, quickness, and they'll determine that. But I don't think it's going to be with him putting on another 10 or 15 pounds.
Yeah. So I like Mike Morris a lot, but I don't feel the need for him to weigh more than 300. I'm happy he's not 275. I like this pick a lot less when I thought he was 275.
Yeah, for me, it's just the bigger. I want the bigger defensive ends. We need in the 3-4. We're going to need those guys. I like having you got your zero tech down there who's already going to be pretty big and well rooted up. Then you got a 300-pounder here next to him, and then another guy here next to him that's 295. That's going to keep the space clear for Bobby and company on the back end.
Hmm. Right. Okay, so last thought on Derick Hall, because a lot of people, the negative vibe coming out of this draft, it was mostly positive, but the negative vibe coming out of this draft, if there was one, was, well, we didn't really do that much to fix the run defense. But if you think about this, like think about the edge room for a second here. You have Uchenna Nwosu, good run defender for an edge player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oye Mafe was good against the run last year as a rookie. Derick Hall, I believe he's going to play well against the run. So most of your edge room is guys who play the run well. And when you're looking at a team like the 49ers, because they're the team that obviously kicked our teeth in and we couldn't stop the run against in the playoffs last year, they're not running all over us by plowing right up the gut. They're not going right up a gap for 20 yards a pop. No, they're doing that outside zone run. So is it possible that in trying to fix the run defense so that it can stop a team like the Niners and some of these other teams as well, by the way, like maybe even the Rams and Cardinals, you'd rather get good at stopping the run on the outside than the inside?
Well, yeah, I think that there's definitely something to be said for that. I don't know if I fully buy into it's best to go that route with it, but I think that they're maybe showing their hand and that that's the approach that they're taking with it. I've been wondering if what they're looking to do with all of these moves, if we put them all together and try to say what's the vision here, Brendan, is you run more with the outside with the corners, sometimes in zone, sometimes off coverage, maybe not even the press stuff, but you're having them run some man concepts in that off coverage looks. You keep single high Quandre Diggs over the top clear. You bring down Jamal into the box into stack sets. Now, stack formations don't mean you necessarily are blitzing. You could blitz a little bit more. And we blitzed at 5.4% rate last year, Brendan, which was like 20. I was looking yesterday, 27th in the league or something, is how often we blitzed. But when you're bringing that many guys down, now everybody's got a gap integrity in this, a gap responsibility in this defense, right? So the safety comes down. It's like you're into the B gap here. And this guy is going to be shooting a gap and a half here to the A gap to his right. And then his defensive tackle to him shooting this gap. And what you end up doing is you just clog all of the running lanes. So what you're talking about with that is that essentially then when you press those edges out and setting that edge for those fly sweeps, or like Atlanta did with us last year, Brendan, on the pitch plays to Cordell Patterson, which gassed us what he ran for 160 against us in that game. A lot
Right.
of those were on those outside runs. So what you do is you set that up and you really reroute those ball carriers back inside, and then you have the lurking defender like a Jamal down in the box to then pick up the running back who has to, once the edge gets set, now he has to cut inside that edge defender, right? That's where the guy's still doing his job on the edge on that, Brendan, where you could technically ding a guy in that point in the run game because he's not making the tackle, but his first and foremost job on the defense there is to set that edge and route the ball carrier back inside. And if he's got help with the eighth man defender in the box with the extra safety, now that guy can come in there to make that tackle, and he's unblocked, being at Jamal at that point, right? He's
Mhm.
essentially the unaccounted defender in that
Yeah.
moment. I don't know if they're going to do that, but that would be a way that this could all kind of come together to make a lot more sense.
Right, because again, I like to try to look at things not just one dimensionally sometimes. And you look at some of the good defenders we added, guys like Witherspoon as well. He's another guy who's going to be really good against the run. He's not
Mhm.
a 400-pound nose tackle in the middle taking up a lot of space, but he's going to find a way to be good against the run in his own way. So I can understand that we didn't address like the most immediate and obvious part of a run defense this offseason, really. But what I'm trying to say is we found these other ways to, I believe, improve things.
Yeah, and there's not necessarily just one way to stop the run. Maybe there's a different, especially in the modern era with the evolution of football, maybe there is this different fashion to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so at this point, I think it is about time we take a look at our final top 100 pick from this draft. Our fourth rookie from this class was a running back from UCLA, Zach Charbonnet. And if there was a pick in this draft that Seahawks fans generally did not like, it was probably this one. And if there was a pick that the experts gave us a bad grade for, it was probably this one. Over and over again, when I look at like expert articles and they're writing about this stuff and they're saying, we're going to grade each pick that each team made, the Charbonnet pick always gets the lowest grade. And it's always the thing dragging it down. So let's talk about this, because I like this pick. I thought this pick was really good. Maybe it's not a great pick, but I liked it. I was on board with it. So let's unwrap this a little bit. 22 years old. He's just over 6 feet. He's basically 6 feet and a half inch, 69th percentile, 214 pounds, 44th percentile. So right around the middle in terms of weight at the combine. Has long arms for a running back. I don't know how much that helps you, but 32-inch arms, 81st percentile. Almost 10-inch hands, 9 7/8 inches, 88th percentile. Ran a 4.53 40, which was actually faster than expected, 66th percentile. Good 10-yard split, 1.54, 72nd percentile. 37-inch vert, really good, 81st percentile. 10-foot 2-inch broad, 78th percentile. 18 bench press reps was only 35th percentile, though. So let's talk about Zach Charbonnet and what he's bringing to the table here.
A fun back to watch on tape, and there's a lot of things that he can do that stands out. So he's a very good runner of the football, and the unique runner that is neither, I would say, elusive or power, but gives you a nice mix between the two. He can essentially do the old, I can run you over, or I can juke you out your shoes. One thing is clear with him watching the tape is that the first tackler is very rare to bring him to the ground. He is usually going to break that tackle one way or another. He is a guy that is also the epitome of the running back that does fall forward, and he stopped here. He's not getting any more. Oh, he still gets another 2 or 3 yards as he's kind of pulling everybody down to the ground to get through the end of the run. He is missing the top end speed a little bit that you would like. I was looking at trying to go back as I was doing the deep dive today and researching for the show and trying to comp him back a little bit to Nick Chubb, but I just don't think it's a good enough comp because he's just not quite as explosive. And Nick Chubb kind of put up the same testing numbers he did, but like 11 pounds heavier and stronger, I think. And so I couldn't quite get there on that. I've struggled with a couple of different comps on him, but he's can catch the ball in the backfield tremendously. The production is insane kind of for this back in the respect of 400 yards the last 2 years, 25 touchdowns. He's caught like 60, 70 passes over that 2-year span, something like that in addition. So marvelous production coming out of UCLA. You couldn't ask for more in that respect. He's even got an initial year in Michigan where he's playing in a different offense. If you want to go, well, he just played in the Chip Kelly. Well, he played in a pro style system in Michigan with Harbaugh when he first came on the scene there in that freshman year. And so he's played in a couple of different offenses as well, which I think will be helpful. And I don't think he can get to a spot quite of like a Nick Chubb running back, where Chubb, I think for a couple of years here has been a top 3 running back in this league. But I do think that he could be, like a top 10 back in this league if he can round out. And I do think this is another one of those players like Walker was last year, if we're talking about the NFL in 2005 or the NFL in 1995 or 1985. He's a first round running back. But we're in a new era, and this is where the valued running backs drop. And this is the debate, Brendan. You've had it in your chat. I've had my chat. This has been going back since the Walker pick last year. What is the value of a running back? Where's the proper place to pick them? How long should you wait? We're not going to solve that debate here now anyway, more further. But I do believe, in my opinion, I think you land here too, that because these running backs no longer really get taken in the first round, absent a generational talent like Bijan Robinson, when you're now picking these guys in the second round, the value is there. You're getting a first round running back in the second round. Yes, that still doesn't remove any of the stuff people talk about Brendan, the value later and deeper on in the draft. That stuff does still exist, but it's also both of those things are true. And so I think you are getting that in this guy, and he's going to be a guy who will find a role here instantly. We needed the depth at the position. It's been one that we've struggled to keep the depth and talent of depth, not just depth, but the talent of depth up to snuff when we lose the starter. And they've accomplished that, I think, here with this pick.
Right. And people need to remember, going into this draft, we had 2 running backs on the roster. So even if you don't value running backs, you have to concede that we needed 2 more.
Mhm.
And not anybody that we had hanging around. Darwin Thompson was not going to cut it. So even if you don't see the value of the running back, you know you needed 2. And I think it's fair to say, given the fact that DJ Dallas has kind of been, he's just a guy. He's just a guy you have on your roster and you feel okay about.
Yeah.
One of them needed to be a pretty serious player, and that's what this guy is. So I don't get it from that angle. I think that at the time there were a lot of people who were eyeing other particular players, and that's where the anger came from. Like JMS was still there, Osiris Torrance was still there. A lot of people really liked those guys. That was the kind of sense that I got when we made those picks. But regardless, I think it's a good pick. I will admit I probably like it a little more than I should, because this was a guy I had my eye on kind of the whole college season, because I
You did
watched him
last
so
year.
much.
We were talking about him last year because we thought he was going to come in the draft last year.
Yeah, he's a Pac-12 player, a lot of fun to watch, and been incredibly productive. Like last year, he averaged, I think, 7 yards a carry and averaged 8.7 yards per catch, which is pretty crazy. I mean, you hand the ball to the guy on every single play, they're never going to stop you at that rate. If
Yeah,
this was Madden,
the
mhm,
7 yards, because even for running backs in college football, where you go, well, it's 7 yards a carry is incredible. Like that's at the college level, that's insane. Again, he's just insane production for what he put out there at UCLA, man.
mhm. Yeah, so the things, probably the best trait that he has is contact balance. He can take hits and just stay up. There were so many times I was watching him against Oregon. I watched him against Utah, which were 2 of his best games from the last couple years. And he's like running along the sideline. Somebody hits him to knock him out of bounds, and somehow he just doesn't move. Like he just doesn't go out of bounds. He just keeps going. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense, but he does it somehow. The other thing that really stands out about him, I think, is his vision. He doesn't have great open field moves, but he makes a lot of players miss because he just kind of sets them up with his
Yeah.
footwork and like knowing where the play is going to go, knowing where he should be, knowing where the blocker is going to go, that kind of stuff. Really, really impressive at that kind of thing. And that's probably the thing that stands out the most about him as a running back. Like you said, he's an excellent pass catcher, although I will say he did not line up very much wide with the in college. I actually counted. He lined up as a receiver about 87 times across his 4 seasons. So that's not
Yeah.
really a part of his game. He doesn't really have a diverse route tree. Like when I watched him, basically every route he ran was just like the little out to the
Flat.
flats. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a safety valve, but he's a good one. He's a good
Yeah.
one. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
Absolutely not.
he certainly, and he can catch well, and he can turn into a runner after catching the ball really fast and get dangerous with the ball in his hands after that point. But he's not Jamar Gibbs or Kenny McIntosh and those guys you can legit line him up in the slot.
Yeah. Only fumbled twice on 650 career touches, so not really a fumbler.
So
He's
it's that big hands and those big long arms, man. He's like an
mhm,
octopus. He can just wrap it all the
yeah.
way around it.
Yeah. He's also kind of the Sean Alexander thing where the closer he gets to the end zone, the more he starts churning and churning and churning. He's got a nose for the end zone. He's doesn't have great top end speed, but once he gets going, he accelerates pretty quickly. And once he gets going, he accelerates up to his top speed quickly, at least. Lot to
One
like with him.
1.54 10-yard split, I think, if my memory is
Yes.
correct. So
Yeah,
yeah,
which
that's
is
that acceleration.
well above average. I'd call it good as far as 10-yard splits go for a running back.
Yeah, I would say it's up there. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs to me was the most sudden in this draft, Brendan. I know somebody else like Archain put up like a 159, but Archain weighed 180 pounds. Gibbs, I think at 190 put up a 151. This guy nearly 254 at 215 almost put up a 154.
Yeah. How do you feel about AJ Dillon as a pro comp, by the way, just out of curiosity?
I hate it.
Really?
I absolutely hate it as a comp. And not just hate it, I despise it as a comp. Um, Two completely different running backs on their tape coming out of college. Absolutely one of the more robotic runners that I've ever seen with AJ Dillon coming out. I've never seen a running back with AJ Dillon that came out that was so big, that was tackled so very easily. You talk about contact balance. AJ Dillon is the antithesis of contact balance. I can't get even close to that comp myself with it. AJ's big, but he plays like he looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. And this kid that we're talking about, you mentioned it, he can run hard. He can work off contact. He's going to battle in there. He ain't going to die easy. Too many dying easy. Too many ankle tackles for me with AJ Dillon.
Yeah, I'm not saying I have that comp. I
Oh,
don't.
I've
But
heard
the
it.
reason why I
Yeah.
ask is because NFL.com had it as their comp, and I thought that was a little bit weird.
I have heard it, and it's one that to me it's a lazy comp, Brendan, because what they're doing essentially is they're like, well, this guy weighs about what this guy weighs with about this. It's like what I was starting to do with Chubb, and then I had to back off with the Chubb thing. It's like initially Chubb, I'm like, oh, he's 5'11" here with the same kind of. But no, the more you got to look at, you got to dive away from that on it, and I don't think you can go there. The best comps I've had are these ones. I still think Steve with the upright running style, Steven Jackson minus 4 inches and 20 pounds. But the best one I think I've gravitated to is the Chip Kelly one. I think Chip Kelly hit this one right on the head. It's perfect. I don't think that anybody else has said anyone that's better, and that's Matt Forte.
I remember Matt Forte. I think he had a couple years where he led the league in scrimmage yards.
He did. Absolutely a great, just all around, running back with the ball and catching, running the ball. He was kind of forgotten about because he was in Chicago at a time when they weren't particularly good, but he had a good couple of years there of run where he was really almost their whole offense in many respects.
So, yeah, some other notable stats from him last year. He averaged 4.2 yards per carry after contact, had 806 yards after contact total, and he broke 68 tackles in 10 games. Over his 4-year career, he played in 40 games and broke or made a defender miss 176 times, which I believe was tops for any player across that period, except for maybe Bijan.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, and I'd have to look at some more numbers to confirm that this is the case, but he had 98 career runs of 10 plus yards or more. But he only had 49 of 15 yards or more, which I think is kind of indicative of the fact that he doesn't have that top breakaway speed. Like a lot of guys are turning those 10-yard plays into long plays because they're just outrunning everybody. He's not. So that is kind of one of his shortcomings as a player. He doesn't have that high top speed. I did find a few snaps where he looked a little indecisive to me at the line of scrimmage, waiting for the hole when he just needed to just go. There were a couple of those. There was one play against Oregon where he bounced it to the outside and there was just nothing there and he lost yards. Upright runner, like you said, which does give it, they call it a big strike zone for targets. For it to be for defenders. The one thing that I'm really wondering on, and I want your take on this because I'm not sure how I feel about it. Over the last 2 seasons, he has, according to PFF, about 55 pass blocking reps. So they really did not use him as a pass blocker very much because they like to use him as a receiver a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So therefore, we don't really know how good he is at it because they just didn't ask him to do it very often. And I feel like that's going to be a big part of this working to its maximum ability. So do you think that, how do you feel about him as a pass protector?
I saw a couple of reps with him doing it, and he looked solid to me in that respect of things. He's got the long arms. He's got the strength. He's well put together to do it. Like a guy like Kenneth Walker, it's an uphill battle because he's 5'9", and he's well yoked up, but he's just, he's only so big, to kind of perform those duties. So he didn't maybe do it a lot, but I think that he'll be fine with it. And admittedly, I didn't have a lot of snaps with him. Like you said, Chip Kelly's, whole thing is trying to send out as many people out into running routes as he can. Blocking is not what he's not trying to max protect, for instance. So I think he'll be fine in that respect. He's well set up to be able to pull it off. And he's not like even Travis Homer, who got good at it, was still always a little bit undersized. And again, another guy at 5'9", trying to be that third down back. It's kind of tough because those linebackers are coming in at sometimes, 6'1", 235, 240, and you're trying to 5'9", 205 to take them on in the hole, and you're just getting driven back right in the quarterback's kitchen. I think he'll be able to be a little bit better about that.
Yeah. One thing that I did notice a lot when I was watching the tape from the last 2 years, there's a lot of snaps where there's play action. So Charbonnet, fakes like he's getting the ball. He doesn't get the ball. Like it's a shotgun draw, and then it's zone read, right? Because DTR is pulling the ball back, and then Charbonnet goes to block somebody. I don't think PFF counts those as a blocking rep for some reason because it was like play action or something.
Agreed.
But
yeah.
But he did pretty good. There was one snap against, I think it was Oregon, where he just completely whiffed and gave up a pressure. But I didn't think it was too bad either. But I wanted to ask about that because if he's going to be a third down back, which I think that's going to be a decent chunk of his role, then that's something that's going to be pretty important for him to be able to do.
I think the nice thing with it is that you're really going to have to ask him to do the linebacker A-gap blitz stuff is where you'll ask him to really step up, because the benefits of having Cross and Lucas on the outside is you're going to be able to trust them one-on-one. You don't need to get him out there running chip blocks. You don't need him out there helping them on double teaming. He can just go run routes now and get out into the passing attack and do what he did at UCLA. It's really only when you're seeing those pre-snap reads of them showing a casino blitz or stacking the two middle linebackers over the A-gap. Well, that'll be the point where that tells the story about him, is whether or not he can hold up in that realm. But I think that's the one benefit of having Lucas and Cross. We don't have as much of a need for that with those guys on the outside to help.
Right. But I watched every snap that he had against Oregon and the game against Utah where he had almost 200 yards. They were doing like some option play type stuff, like the old wishbone almost at UCLA. Some pretty fun stuff they're doing over there with that offense, of course. It's the Chip Kelly offense, but a lot of impressive burst, a lot of impressive power that he shows. I do think he can become a good short yardage back. I watched some snaps and I'm like, yeah, this guy can be a good short yardage back. He just needs to be more decisive. So I think he can get there. He also needs to get lower sometimes.
That's where that pad lean comes in. Like you talked about getting upright, because if you're getting a little bit more of the lean, that's going to aid you when you get on contact to then still driving forward as you keep your feet moving. Whereas if you're upright and you take the below, you lose a lot of your momentum in that manner. But I saw the same thing on tape. I think he's going to work out as being a good short yardage back, much like in the same route I do for him as a pass protector, just because he has the tools to get it done. You said as well, when he gets down near the goal line, he shows you what he can do. Short yardage situations there as he gets a little hungry for that end zone, those Alexander eyes for the end zone. And then he starts to really, tune it up with those 25 touchdowns over the last 2 years that he was able to get. And that's 25 touchdowns, like you said, Brendan, without really busting off 70, 80-yard runs. A lot of those are on the back of him running short yard situations at the goal line. And he'll be able to do it, and he'll take that load off of Walker's plate, much like the third down back role, which I'm very happy with, because now we can just allot guys maybe to their certain roles on the team.
So you do think he'll be our third down back this year?
Well, Kenny McIntosh is going to give him a hell of a push. So, and Kenny gives you a skill set that's in a lot of ways almost like kind of perfection for the third down back, if you're really going to talk about it. I mean, Kenny gives you the ability to flex him out into empty sets. You put him out wide on a linebacker and then have him run a 9 route, and he's going to smoke that linebacker. You're going to draw safeties over to having to double up on Kenny over the top. Then when you're like, that's just stuff you're not going to do with Charbonnet necessarily, but I think initially he's the guy, he'll be the lead dog. And then unless McIntosh really lights it up in the way he potentially could, then he will have that. He'll be the guy running it. I don't think Dallas's days of being a third down back are over at this point.
Yeah. He's the fourth running back now.
He's number 4. I'm sorry, DJ. It's been a good run, man. Is what it is.
Yeah. And Dallas is good on special teams too, by the way. So he'll have a role there.
He's our kick returner, man. Everybody's got their role. So some bigger than others, DJ. But you can't stay healthy, my man. You're made of glass a little bit. We got to do what we got to do around you.
Right. So the nice thing also with Charbonnet is that he can be a bell cow type back too, because we all know K9 is not likely to play all 17 games. Most running backs don't. So when that day comes, I'm sure it's going to come at some point this year. You can say, okay, Zach, you're getting the ball 30 times today, and you can feel good about that, I think.
Indeed, you can. And that's the point of this pick, is that you don't want to go along here and here's your running game like last year. Oh, look, we got Rashad Penny going. Oh, still good. Okay, Penny goes down. We got Walker in here. Okay, we maintain it. We're at the same level here. Oh, Walker's starting to get beat up around Tampa Bay. Okay, we're going no Dallas. No, okay, we're going down to Homer. Oh, not as good. Not as good. Oh, running game is not as effective. Now, when you've got to go from 1 to 1A, you can still remain effective and highly talented at the running back position. And the benefits that brings. Is it still a position reliant on quarterbacks and offensive linemen and skill position players to take the heat off those guys? Sure. But is there still something to be gained by having a highly talented guy that can, create yards on his own, or like you talked about with his yards after contact, where we learned last year with Walker, that was one of his great stats coming out of Michigan State, and it translated to the NFL level. So too do I believe that will be the case with Zach Charbonnet.
Okay. So that's basically, I think, all that can be said about him. Again, Charbonnet is a player where it's pretty easy to figure him out, right? Like he's a running back with great contact balance and some power, good pass catcher, good vision, good burst, not great top speed, not elite receiving ability in the sense that he can't line up wide like some of these guys do. But what makes him appealing is pretty easy to tell if you watch him for a little bit. You watch his highlight reel, you will get a pretty good idea of what makes this guy good.
I feel like we're saying this is a common sentiment, but I think it's just a very much a truth of at least, let's say, 3 of these 4 picks we've talked about today, Brendan. When it comes to Witherspoon, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and this guy, these weren't really hard evaluations when you turn on the tape for both the good and the bad. And it's like Brendan just said, it's mainly almost all good with these guys, but they were fairly versus other prospects we have to look at and take a much harder look at, and really you see what these guys are and you know what you're kind of seeing. And maybe that should make us all that much more encouraged about what they're going to be as a pro, that it was so clear to see with these guys when you do turn on the tape of them. But that was the thing that was to these 3 specific picks of these 4. Hall's a little bit tougher, Brendan. He was a little bit more of, you had to kind of really grind in a bit on that tape. But I love the pick of Hall, but those 3 picks with these Jaxon Smith, Witherspoon, and Charbonnet, just their tape was pretty clear.
Yeah. I mean, I think Witherspoon was kind of tough just because he was a cornerback at number 5 overall. And I think there were a lot of Seahawks fans that were still kind of in the mode of, well, why would we spend a high pick on a corner when we've had so much success in day 3 all these years?
Well, I mean, I can get that, but that's not necessarily anything about the evaluation of looking at the player on the tape, right? Like that's definitely that's valid. That's for sure valid to say, hey, you've gotten by with less. Why suddenly change off that? Especially after Tariq Woolen in the X6 you just had, especially in a cornerback-rich draft where that guy will be probably there later on. But I think that when it came to just turning on the pure tape of him and saying, show him what you got, Witherspoon. He ain't giving up completions. He ain't giving up touchdowns. He's got his share of interceptions. It's pretty clear on that, I think, as far as at least the player. You can argue with that. I think that's a completely valid argument. Say we should have waited because of that. I get the approach of that, and I would not push back against it because it's true. Byron Maxwell, Sherman, Tariq Woolen, Shaquille Griffin was a late 3rd round, almost a 4th round pick. I mean, the value's been insane in what you've got from the later round guys. So I get that.
DJ Reed was undrafted, I think, and you picked him up off San Fran's
waiver. Yeah. I mean, I get that whole approach of it with it. And I think the one thing I would say to the folks that get caught up in it in that way is 2 main things. Number 1, being that this team has waited 12 years to pick a player at the cornerback position this high, that there's never been a place in the 1st round that they've ever taken a cornerback. The fact that now they do this for the first time now tells me that there's something to this pick. Something in the pick in the way they want to use him, something in the pick in the way that they see a special level of talent here that, you may not be seeing out there as a viewership than the way that they're seeing it, but they trust in that view of it, that this guy's got something a little bit extra to him. And certainly we know Detroit behind us, Brendan, saw that very same thing, right? That's not a rumor thing. We now know Detroit was going to pick him if we weren't going to at 6. So this kid was going in the top 6 of this draft. We weren't taking him at 5. And so I do come back to that as a thing of like, for them to alter off this, they knew all of this reality with the cornerback situation. And for them to alter their philosophy and approach, maybe there's something really sparkling about this guy to them on the tape and what they're seeing from him, that he is truly that difference maker to warrant this pick being, this high. And the last thing I'll say on it is just, let's also remember 4 times we picked in the top 15 with Schneider here. This was the 5th time this year. The other 4 times were all successes to varying levels. So one thing I'll tell you about is not likely he's going to fail based on the past track record of picking in the top 15 in 1st rounds for John Schneider and Coach Carroll.
Seahawks OG, thank you for the $9.99. Great stuff tonight, guys. Can't wait for the next batch because watching UGA versus LSU, it seemed like all the plays Carter made were versus LSU left. Against LSU right, not much. Bradford was RG. Go Hawks. I've heard people say this. I don't know if it's true yet or not, but I have heard that.
I put up a short of all the reps between Carter and Bradford in that game. So it's on my channel right now. It's just a cut up of the shorts, just the reps against Carter and Bradford going mano a mano. And they both gave as good as they got, Carter didn't dominate him. Bradford didn't dominate him. It was kind of it was even battle for the most part.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out a little later. I don't think I've seen that yet. But yeah, so this is a nice way to segue into the rest of the rookies. We're not going to do those tonight because we wanted to make sure we had enough time for everybody. So next week we go over to your channel, and that's probably, unless something huge happens between now and then, which I don't even know what it would be at this point, right?
Quinn Williams.
Yeah, it would be something like that. We're going to open up about the top rookies from day 3, which is guys who were still drafted. We're not going to do UDFAs yet. We're going to talk about the 6 guys we drafted on day 3 a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to get a deep dive in on these ones and go a little bit to end on these.
So yeah, that's Bradford, that's Young, Oluwatimi, Morris, Reed, and McIntosh.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
So I hope that sounds good to everybody. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of productive discussion on these guys. I think we both like all the picks we made. We like some of them more than some of the others. But I think I was pretty on board with everything we did on these first 2 days. At least I was okay with it.
I really like you're adding to this team in the long term. There's some upside to these guys. There's those initial returns on all 4 of them, where I think they're all going to find some kind of role in this team next year. And if we talk about this, looking at this through 2 different lenses, Bren, the lens of next year and the lens of the future, it's a beautiful thing, because this helps your chances for the lens of the next year in really being competitive. And maybe you can become an elite team next year if these guys can round into shape a little bit quicker in that respective things. And then the long-term realm, where you have maybe the number 1 slot in all of the NFL. You have a top 10 running back in all of the NFL. You've got an edge that both can play the run and play the pass equally well with Boye and Mafe. They're both kind of set up in that way in the future. That's awesome. Say nothing of maybe having a lockdown cornerback on top of that. These are just the first 4 selections in a given draft. I mean, that's a lot of other drafts for a lot of other teams. That's okay. We did good. That's our whole draft. We're done now. We've accomplished what we need to accomplish. But with the Seahawks, they went even more beyond that. And yeah, that's what we'll be covering next week.
All right. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Brandon, thank you for joining me tonight. That was a lot of fun.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you everybody who showed up. We had about 300 people at the peak today. We still got about 250 in today as of right now. And I should be going live on Twitch in the next, I don't know, half hour, doing more Zelda tonight. So hope to see you guys over there. And next week, like I said, we are going to talk about the rest of our draft picks. So hope to see you guys there. And there's only one way to end the show.
Gotta let them know.
There's one way to end this. We got to remind you guys, because we're heading into the slowest part of the offseason. This is the one time a year when the NFL calendar is kind of barren. So you guys might forget sometimes.
But they got baseball in the mind, man. They got baseball right now. It's all on everybody's mind. We got to let them know.
Yeah, some people hockey, some people baseball, some people, we got basketball playoffs right now too. But it's got to be said, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.